This is the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting for Tom Monroe. It is December 16th, 2020, and the time is 6:07 p.m. I'd like to take a roll call. Members of the commission and staff present during tonight's remote meeting. Please answer here at present, starting with myself, Keith Romano, Lois Spence, who's our vice chair and secretary.
Here.
Jim Stewart, who is our treasurer and also a licensed surveyor and engineer in the state of Connecticut.
Here.
Clark Gingras. Oh, Clark is going to join us later. Ross Masaraco.
Here.
BJ Hall.
Here.
Denise Halstead, our inland wetlands agent.
Here.
Donna Szynski, our office manager.
Here.
Sarah Stroud, our recording secretary.
Here.
Also with us tonight is Chris Sullivan from the Southwest Conservation District and Russ. Is he here? Russ D'Arienzo.
I'm here. I told my son I loved him. I have my mic on.
Okay.
Sir.
All right. Before we start, I'll read our mission statement and how the meeting will proceed. Inland Wetlands Mission Statement. The object and purpose of the Inland Wetlands Commission is to provide for the overall protection and preservation of the inland wetlands and watercourse with the town of Monroe. This is a special meeting, so I'm not going to go through meeting procedure. We're just going to run right into it. Kevin, you have a timeline of 7 o'clock. Kevin?
Hang on. Hi, yes, I do have another hearing at 7, but I'll probably be back and forth the best as I can, pending as best of my ability.
All right. Also, I'll probably be, as soon as Clark shows up, I'll let Lois continue the meeting. I still have preparations for the snowstorm I haven't completed. So I have to leave around that time. Okay, so let's start. Who are we starting with?
Intervener.
Okay, Joel. Where's Joel?
Yeah, here.
Okay. You could go ahead. Do you have an idea of how long this might take from your side?
We're going to be brief this evening.
All right, great.
For all the reasons stated.
Okay. All right, great.
The first thing I want to do just quickly is I really want to thank the commission for your generous patience over these many months now. And it's been a long slog, but I appreciate your diligence, patience. I know my client and I and our consultants greatly appreciate your patience and the careful consideration you've given to this application. And once again, we will be brief tonight. When we first spoke to you in June, we advocated very strongly for a site visit. We advocated very strongly that the commission retain a consultant. And I think that those two things have proven, I hope you'll agree, but the intervener would suggest that those two components have been critical in the process and have been a great benefit. And we appreciate the input by the consultants. Do we align on everything? No, but we align on a lot of critical points. So I want to just touch on 3 or 4 points tonight. And I will, as you know, you received new materials from our consultants, and there will be an opportunity, obviously, to ask them questions, but I will get into that momentarily. But as a starting point tonight, I wanted to once again remind you, and I know that you recognize this and that you've commented on it, but it's critical that we just note that this project involves a remediation of conditions that arose from, conduct that was, egregious and reckless disregard of the permits, and reckless disregard of your wetland regulations, and probably involves the largest violation in the history of Monroe. And I note that in the application, right from the get-go, Kevin Soley in his letter to the commission noted in the first paragraph of his letter, going back to this spring, that this application is also intended to address and correct all alleged violations set forth in the letter that Denise Halstead and that the commission endorsed dated November 13, 2019. And another kind of, it's been 6 months that we've been appearing, and I've heard this commission deal with a lot of business, including other violations. And a uniform remark that the commission has made is that violations follow a different process than permits. And I understand that it's the policy of this commission to cure violations. They must be cured, they must be remediated. And the point is, it's not about punishing violators, it's about getting the wetlands restored and eliminating the violation as quickly as possible. And once again, it's not a punitive thing. So I offer that to you because the applicant to keep waving that, they bought the property last May. And I just want to point out that, as you recognize, the site of this, the proposal is just in horrible shape. And this crater is, just massive. And I suppose I should footnote this. I just want to offer this quick comment, and I am going to move quickly here, so please bear with me. I just want to say for the record that this quarry situation is a dangerous condition, and I was struck by the fact that when we were at the site doing our site visit on that Saturday afternoon, the applicant was very careful to not allow any of us to stand near the edge of the quarry. And I am struck by the fact that there's no fence, there's no warnings, there's no nothing. I mean, there's some no trespassing signs, but I just want to point that out, that there is a dangerous condition on the site. So just to get to the sort of the meat of the matter on the violation and the permit, we have submitted materials in compliance with the orders of the commission. And last Friday, we submitted a letter from Spath Bjorklund, from Dave Bjorklund. We submitted a letter by Evan Glass of Alta, and we submitted a letter from George Logan. And the letters from George Logan and Evan identified a lot of missing information that continues to not, a number of issues that continue to have not been satisfied by the applicant. We're not going to go through that. You have that in writing. I'm sure that you have, or you will have, an opportunity to review those letters. But I think the largest thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that we submitted just a conceptual remediation plan, and you saw it, and what it involved was, and I'm going to call it a 3-year plan. And what it does is create a regrading of the eastern portion of the north end of the site. So the area adjacent to the quarry. And you could see, and I will have Dave just describe it quickly in a moment. And I want George Logan, I'll ask him for a comment on it. But I offer it to you as a prudent alternative, because what it does is, instead of the 10-year timeline that the applicant has proposed to sort of restore the entire site, what this does is really addresses the area of focus for this commission, and that is restoring the natural contour with respect to rehydrating the wetland as quickly as possible. And so let's assume that it is involves 300,000 cubic yards of fill. What this enables this commission to do is to approve a plan that that you can see and that you can monitor over this 3-year period to see what the actual impact is on rehydrating the impacted wetlands. It's manageable, it's digestible. You don't have to deal, with many of the larger issues that confront us with this project. Dave Bjorklund, are you able to just walk through it just quickly for us, if through you, Mr. Chair? And I think he quickly.
Yes, Mr. Green. Am I on?
I hear you.
Okay. Members of the commission, this is Dave Bjorklund. I'm president of the firm of Spath Bjorklund Associates. And just briefly, what we had proposed as an alternate plan, which does accomplish what the applicant is trying to do, which would be to restore the watershed to the vernal pool. I understand through sitting through numerous nights that this reestablishing that watershed to the vernal pool is controversial, but if that is where the commission wants to go, with this proposal, what we had shown in the plan, and it's purely conceptual, is that just start at the LOD on the west side of the wetlands, and then just grade up at 1 or 2%. We had proposed a 2% grade, just grade up from that area, which is not what the application proposes. It's a lot less fill, and grade up to the edge of the original watershed, and then reestablish that watershed area much quickly. And then grade in the future from the edge of that watershed, in a westerly direction, grade down. There is a low point which feeds into the town of Monroe's detention basin, and just to grade in that general direction. This is a lot less fill. I think that in a final grading plan there could be a space set aside to construct a building or a couple of buildings. If the typical building in the Pepper Street Industrial Park is 30,000 square feet, that building or buildings of that size could be incorporated into that area. And it is a lot less fill, and it could be accomplished a lot quicker.
So that is Exhibit 65. I'm happy to put that up on the screen, or if Donna, if you put
Mr.
it
Green?
up on the screen, I can put.
Mr. Green, let me just interject here for a second. We are not going to approve an alternative that's not presented by the applicant. So it's great that we know there's other options available that could be maybe explored at a later date. And it is helpful, but we're not going to accept this application with a laundry list of conditions or alternate plans. We have to make a judgment on what's presented to us, and it is helpful to know that there may be another alternative that wasn't thought of. But at this point, I think the details aren't really going to help us with anything, because we're not going to say, okay, approve, the intervener's plan. You understand?
Yes, and maybe if I was imprecise in my language, we are, as Dave Bjorklund had indicated, this is a conceptual plan. Obviously, it is preliminary, and it is offered to show that there are alternatives. I'm getting a terrible echo from, I don't know if everybody's muted, or that might help. But the point is, it shows that there are alternatives that address the goals and objectives of this commission to address violations much more quickly. So that is why we offered it. And I know that one response by the commission might be.
Caller 3. Anna, can you mute caller 3? We're getting a lot of static from them.
All right, that's better. So thank you. So the point is, again, that it shows that there are alternatives that would achieve the goals and objectives of this commission in both addressing the violation and in addressing the hydration of the wetlands that we all seek. And I also offer it because it's not the position of my client. While my client opposes this 10-year plan and the application that's presented, be assured that it is the objective of my client to see this site remediated. It is the objective of my client to see that work done as quickly as possible. But my client just has no faith, based on everything we've heard from our consultants, from the consultant commission and so forth, that this plan is ready for approval. And it also obviously involves a long scope. Now, in terms of this concept, and one of the points that the applicant may raise is that they are proposing to start pumping water to hydrate the wetlands from a bedrock well. And as Mr. Logan discusses in his letter, but I would just like him address the commission briefly on the issue of presented by pumping the water from the well to rehydrate the wetland. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just like to ask George Logan to briefly comment on that.
Okay, go ahead, George. State your name for the record.
Yes, George Logan, Marine Ecological Services. So I think from the beginning, even your own consultant, Mr. DiRienzo, had agreed that a 9-year program of pumping is a little on the long side. So the alternative, or a alternative that would shorten that, obviously would be beneficial, would be more optimal, whereas the pumping would be definitely a suboptimal solution. So that's part of the alternative thinking here. And the other part is that, as even the applicant's consultant, Mr. Kenny, had suggested, is that this particular wetland that have been discussing for some time, Wetland 2, Vernal Pool 2, that most of its water that it receives during the pre-existing condition was through shallow groundwater flow. And the issue is that one of a number of issues, but one of that I wanted to highlight was the pH. So the pH, we don't know what the pH of the wetland is, the baseline pH. That's something that we've asked, and I assume that it's acidic. Most of these wetlands are acidic. So what would have to happen is we would have to test the pH of the well. And let's say that the pH of the well is similar. So that will be a good thing. But the problem is that the water that's getting into the wetland under a pumping situation, which again, in my view, is not optimal, is through just one point of discharge, and then the water trickles through. It doesn't enter the wetland the way that it did the pre-existing condition, or the way that we were hoping that it would happen if the watershed was restored, where it would kind of come through a diffuse situation for the entire perimeter of the wetland and not just from one particular point. So again, this discussion goes to the point that an alternative of getting the watershed up and running in a shorter period of time would be a more ideal situation than pumping for 9 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Mr. Green?
Just while we're on this point, I'm just wondering if I can ask Mr. DiRienzo to weigh in on that issue as well, just as briefly, as he can, through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Russ. State your name.
Russ DiRienzo, Arcadis, consultant for the commission. I don't want to say things that turn the commission in the wrong way. I want them to make their own decision. That's important to me. I agree. I've never, in my 30 years of chairman and 15 years of being a wetland enforcement officer, seen a notice of violation remediation plan include a building, a parking lot, a septic system, and filling with 900,000 cubic yards of material. They're two separate issues, and that's my opinion. There should have been a plan to deal with the NOV and end the story. And that plan shouldn't include filling 900 cubic yards of material into a quarry. That's an application. That it shouldn't be thrown in under an envelope. And as shown by the intervener, there's feasible and prudent alternatives to mitigate and do the remediation with a much quicker time. 10 years is ridiculous. It doesn't work, in my opinion. The bedrock well's a good idea. Why not just keep it forever and forget the filling? There's all kinds of things that should have been looked at, in my opinion. And I agree with a lot of what Mr. Green says. I think a remediation plan should not include development. There should be two very separate issues. I did look at court cases. I don't see anything because nobody's ever tried to do this. Use a mitigation plan to develop a property. Quite frankly, I think the application is they want to fill the quarry for a business purpose, which may be fine, but on its own merit, can't be tied in to a remediation plan. That's my opinion. It's always been my opinion, and so you have it.
Thank you, Russ. Mr. Green, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly. So I have provided the commission previously 3 meetings ago with a memo. It's the view of the intervener fill that has been deposited on the site, which is apparently some 86,000 yards to date. In our view, there is a wetland impact. I discussed this several meetings ago. I understand that your consultant and I may disagree. I have provided you with a memo that I think shows that there was filling activities that did affect the watershed. And that sort of leads me to our petition to intervene, which I just want to comment on briefly. I have provided you with a memo on petition. You do have our petition. You have an amended petition. And, you have those documents. You can read those. Attorney Finn and I disagree, I think, to some degree based on his comments on our petition. I just want to state that the burden is not that great for the intervener, particularly in this matter where there is once again a violation. I would call the commission to the wording of our petition, and really all we need to prove is a colorable claim and that there's a reasonable chance of our claims being valid. And in this case, we have alleged that the activities that the owner of the property, and that includes the owner and the previous owner, have impacted on-site wetlands. And we've talked about the claims are that there's been pollution disruption or alteration of on-site wetlands and water courses, that the natural capacity of the wetlands and water courses to do all of the functions that they perform have been altered, and that they've been significantly negatively and irretrievably impacted. And when I was trying to shorten my presentation for you this evening, I looked through this application and I was going to make a more robust presentation, but I think that you can refer right from the get-go to the report by Mr. Kenny in the original application on this material for the notion that the wetlands have been altered by virtue of the activities conducted, the quarrying activities, and that they will be impacted by the proposal. He talked about the impacts on wetlands 2 and 3. You've heard testimony throughout this application on the impact of, and once again, getting to the quarry, the notion that the groundwater was pumped into the detention well on the northern end of the site, on the west side of the northern end of the site, that was pumped from that, or flowed from that detention basin into wetland 1 and resulted in an increased flow, an increased flooding of wetland 1. So, I mean, the record is clear that wetlands 1, 2, and 3 have been altered both by the quarrying and by, the filling that has gone on. So I just don't think that necessarily I think to find that the intervener has proven its case, I think it's pretty evident if you look at the reports and just read our petition. And I think we have stated a valid claim under 22A19 to have standing to intervene in this case. So that's my next point. The fourth point is, and I'll wrap up in a moment, is that the intervener urges you to deny this application. I want to emphasize again that my client, as the owner of a large portion of the property next door that he hopes to develop, and he's here because he is concerned about the impact of this site in terms of what has gone on and what may go on the watershed, the impact on wetlands, the impact on groundwater. That's why he's here. And my client looks forward to a remedial plan being adopted and approved by this commission that's reasonable in scope and that addresses those issues, and that, you know, that this site is developed, that this site is remediated, and my client looks forward to developing his site as well. So I wanted to emphasize that, but the application is incomplete for the many reasons that you've heard over these months. The plan that is proposed is simply too long. I had planned a longer presentation on sort of the length that the applicant requires to produce 980,000 cubic yards of fill. And listening to this commission, I didn't hear you address any violations where you basically said to violators that, you know, we're going to allow you a much longer period of time to remedy this violation due to your economics or due to your economic ability to complete the work. And that is in part what the applicant is suggesting here in running this processing facility, really, to receive fill and be paid for receiving it. And that is consistent with everything that this that I've seen this commission do, and inconsistent again with addressing the violation as quickly as possible. One final word on the filling disagreement we have is that while I saw the WSP reports and I've reviewed their material, arguably the filling that has occurred on the site, this 86,000 yards of fill, was filled almost down to bedrock, down from my unprofessional standpoint. I'm not an engineer, but it did not test all the way down, all of the fill. Some was not. So at this point, I am going to, I'm going to rest. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you have, if members of the commission have questions regarding the submissions by Mr. Bjorklund, the submission by Mr. Glass or Mr. Logan's letter. This might be an opportune moment, or questions for me at this juncture. You're muted.
What we'll do is, because we got the time crunch, we'll put the questions at the end, but I do want to ask a question because I heard you say something that I think I've heard contradictory from both maybe from Russell or from Kevin, about the retention basin being, pumping additional water into the wetlands, when I believe, and the only answer is that that detention basin isn't being even used to its full extent yet. So I don't want to let that go if that was an incorrect statement.
As I heard the testimony from Mr. D'Arienzo during his initial presentation and some other evidence, the dewatering that went on the site, occurred on the site previously, the pump of the quarry, as I understood it, went to that detention basin on that northwest corner of the site. There was that detention basin we saw during the site visit. And as I understood it, the drainage of that detention basin caused water to run in a southerly direction into wetland 1. I would welcome either Mr. Logan, Mr. Glass, or Mr. DiRienzo, indeed, through you, Mr. Chair, to comment
Yeah, I
on
just
that as
want to
well.
make sure that was correctly stated. Russ, do you want to comment on that?
I can clear that up.
Let's just
Kevin
ask
Solly
Russ
for the
first.
record. Sure.
Kevin, let me just let Russ answer, then you can respond after. Russ, on that topic.
Yep, Mr. Kinney in his first report stated that that may be the reason why the fish are present and other vernal pool species are not. That's on the record.
Okay,
And it
my
makes
question.
sense. There's too much water going in there, and I don't agree there should be dewatering into there, even with a permit, because the permit does not allow you to impact a wetland. And the Wetland Commission could ask for a permit to continue dewatering. Thank you.
Okay, but my question is, was that dewatering over, what is that noise? Kevin, you
Toilet?
are you flushing your toilet?
It was an old-fashioned electric pencil sharpener.
Yeah. What I want to know is that did that dewatering now exceed the design of that detention pond?
The only explanation for more water getting into Wetland 1, Vernal Pool 1 is the dewatering. There's no other explanation.
Okay, then
And
yeah.
Mr. Kinney in his report is the one who said that. That may be a possible cause.
All right. Okay, let's see if anybody else has a question. Or Kevin, are you gonna respond to that quickly?
Sure, it's Kevin Solly for the record, licensed PE with Solly Engineering. So that detention basin, while it has received it has received historic dewatering from the operation on the site. I don't think that detention basin has exceeded its design capacity as it was initially designed and approved by this commission and Planning and Zoning Commission to receive not only stormwater runoff from Independence Drive and Enterprise Drive, but also surrounding properties, including additional drainage from this property as part of a future development. So I don't think that basin has exceeded its design capacity, but it it has received historic dewatering from the site.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we know the difference. Okay. Go ahead. We're gonna go through the commission real quick. We'll start with Commissioner Spence.
Actually, this is not a question for the intervener or the experts, but I believe that Mr. Sullivan has to leave early tonight, and he has been present for the last 2 or 3 meetings, and we haven't been able to ask him any questions because he's had to leave before we get a chance. So I would like to ask some questions of him before he has to leave.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Well, you can also, I'm gonna go through one by one, all the commissioners. You can ask questions of anybody at this point, but Kevin Soley and Chris both are leaving shortly. So we'll try to get their questions to them out as soon as possible. Go ahead, Commissioner Spence.
I have a mess of questions for Kevin, but I wanted to start off with Chris. But you have listened to all of these days and weeks and hours of testimony. Has anything, in your opinion, changed with all of the changes in plans and with everything that's happened? Is anything that has changed your opinion, and what is your opinion on where this application stands at this moment?
You're right. There has been a ton of information that has been presented to the commission over time. And I did advise that the commission hire a hydrogeologist expert. And I think some of what Russ mentioned tonight and in previous meetings is pretty telling. How he had mentioned that he didn't believe that the remediation plan as presented would work. He thought it had a low percentage of being successful in rehydrating wetland 2. And I think that's a great objective for a project to reestablish a wetland is a great goal, right? We want that to happen, but we want that to be successful. And so I think that, the commission has to make their own decisions. Obviously, that's your power as the Wetlands Commission for the town of Monroe. And And I honestly, I didn't see the alternative proposal that was presented by Mr. Green and his team at all. So I can't speak to that as having any sort of changing opinions, but I believe that if the commission thinks that there is any sort of incompleteness in the proposal in front of them, then they wouldn't be able to approve it. I do think that the concern of not having a successful proposal to remediate that wetland is a concern of mine, because I do want that to happen, and also understanding that is pretty much in the headwaters of a pretty important watershed. So that would be a concern from my perspective, and my opinion on the project. That's got to be the prominent goal and has to be the most successful piece of the project that if it's going to be approved. That was a really long answer. I'm not sure if it helped you at all, Lois.
Well, I wanted to hear your opinion because you've been present but not present for the last
Yeah,
couple
I'm
of
sorry.
meetings.
I've got a lot of evening conflicts, and so it's bumped up into some things for me.
Well, we appreciate your being here. We appreciate your input. Thank you very much. That's it for me for the moment. I mean, I'll get to Kevin later, but we have other things I'm sure we have to do.
Well, now we're going to go through, let's get some questions. Yeah, let's get some questions. Let's do it now. I mean, I don't think anybody else has to present anything. The applicant gets to wrap up at the end, so unless there's something, Kevin, you needed to do in the last 17 minutes?
Mr. Chairman, just point of order. We do, Kevin wants to present, Bill Kenny wants to present. It's Steve Finn for the record. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And I certainly are going to have some things to say. So I just want to give you sort of where we're at. And I think maybe Mr. Karp on behalf of the applicants may have some things to say. So I just want to let you know sort of what our plan is. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, go. It was, yeah, whenever you want to present, let's do it.
So this is, for the record, Kevin Soley, licensed professional engineer with Soley Engineering. Office is located at 501 Main Street here in Monroe, Connecticut, for the applicant. I just wanted to kind of summarize a couple things. So we did receive staff comments Thursday of last week. We did submit a response to those comments. We didn't want anything to be unresponded to, so we did provide a response on Friday. Part of that was just a request kind of for a conformed and plan set in its entirety. So you probably got a big old package of a whole bunch of drawings and an engineering report just to remove and eliminate any inconsistencies that were identified as part of the staff comments. So we did provide that. One of the other items that we had provided was, as offered at the last hearing, we did provide an updated conservation easement map, which expanded the limits of that conservation easement. We think that's a critical component of the restoration associated with this project, because the activity that's taken place, again, as we've identified, past actions created an issue. We're trying to address that issue. There's this, and I think the conservation easement on the property does a long way to protect those resources moving forward into the future. And I think that's an important component because when we peel all this back, when we really look back at the issue here, we have a piece of property that's been scarred. It's been excavated beyond what was approved, and it's created an issue where it's reduced the watershed and it's impacted some natural resources on the property. We received a violation. We responded to that violation, and in order to do that, we had to make an application for restoration. As we explained at length, there was no mechanism for us to pursue this remediation plan with the Planning and Zoning Commission unless it was a part of a formal application. So we had no other options. We couldn't come in with a remediation application and propose the same activity, which we believe is the best way to address this, to restore the watershed. We believe that to be the case. We could not have done that and then pursued an approval from Planning and Zoning to do that work, which we would be required to do so without the method and the mechanism that we chose. There's no other way for us to pursue this. And as I also want to make a point, as Mr. DiRenzo pointed out, he wasn't aware of an application to address a violation being dealt with in this way. I know for a fact that this commission has actually addressed other violations through the use of an application, and some of those applications even included proposing the construction of buildings. So I don't think we set a precedent by any means. I know this commission has acted on this in the past. You know, we talk about alternatives. I appreciate the intervener, Mr. Bjorklund, providing that alternative plan, but I want to point out his alternative is the same as ours. It's to restore the watershed of the wetland that's been impacted. There is no substantive difference between his suggested alternative and our application because it achieves the same goal. It restores the watershed to rehydrate the wetland. But I do want to point out that there are a couple issues with Dave's suggestion, because while he says, oh, it's easier, it'll be a shorter time frame, he did not provide any detail in terms of how many yards of material would be required to do exactly what he proposed. He didn't provide any indication on what the angle of repose is of that material and how much it would actually have to be placed in order to achieve that. He didn't talk about where the material could be sourced. He said natural material versus the material we're proposing to import. So again, he made a bunch of assertions, but he didn't provide any evidence to support it. Additionally, his proposal would leave the deepest part of the site that is currently exposed groundwater to the elements. And I think it's been identified in a number of different through a number of different hearings, and Mr. Dorenzo echoed it himself. That needs to be filled and covered as soon as possible, because the longer you leave it open, you leave it susceptible to the elements. You leave it susceptible to you know, impacts from anything. So while Mr. Bjorklund's plan, you know, it again, essentially it achieves the same goal that we're proposing, it also leaves that deeper hole and that groundwater exposed for a much longer duration than what we're proposing. And we wanted to make sure that what we did is thoughtful, because you can't just start on one end and fill. You have to do this in a methodical way. You have to place the material in a methodical way. And unfortunately, this isn't an economic consideration. You cannot find the amount of material needed to achieve this goal in a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It isn't. It can't be done. And unfortunately, the only way that it could be done was to just throw money at it. And this real estate is still in Monroe, Connecticut. You can't spend $20 million to import material to address an issue when the land itself isn't worth anywhere near that. So, you know, again, we want to simplify this. We have a site that was impacted. It was over excavated. That over excavation reduced the contributing watershed to wetland systems. We wanted to address that by reestablishing that watershed to rehydrate that wetland. And this was the only mechanism in which we could pursue these approvals with both Wetlands and Planning and Zoning Commission. And I think the rehydration efforts start immediately by the use of the deeper bedrock well to rehydrate during the initial stages and those initial years. And if this commission deems that this application is acceptable, that rehydration could start for this upcoming vernal pool season. And any, you know, future delays or inaction by this commission or Planning and Zoning, all it does is it doesn't address anything, and it's just status quo. And the impact is just going to stay there, where there's an opportunity to address it now, address it immediately, and to try to get improvement to those resources. And you know, that there's concern and comment about that our application is complete. Our application is complete. We've provided all the evidence that we need, and you know, we think that we have addressed all the concerns and all the comments, and frankly, we've done our best given the situation that we have. And this is a very simple application. There's a big hole in the ground. There's a scar on the earth. Our plan is to fill that hole and to restore the watershed associated with those wetland systems. You know, as I stated before, I am going to have to leave for a little bit, but I will try to come back. If the application is still ongoing, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that we have. But I do think that we've certainly done our best to prepare a plan that was well thought out, that had a lot of thought to it, to address the issue that took place and to try to get this thing to move forward, because we want this property to move forward.
All right. Are you set, Kevin?
I think so for now.
Okay, and I know that Mr. Finn said there were some other people from your side that want to speak, but let me just ask Barbara a question, because we've got two things that are contradictory right now involving the P&Z comment about whether this can be combined or it has to be combined or not combined. You know, getting testimony about a P&Z matter, I think you should address that with us, clarify that, because Russ is saying one thing, Kevin is saying another, and it's really another commission or combination of two commissions kind of question, and we don't know anything about that.
Honestly, that's not something I can answer right now. I can look into it and I can advise the commission at a later date about that.
Okay. Thank you. Just to clarify that. Now, also back to you, Mr. Finn, whoever you want to have.
Mr. Chairman, I think Denise, Mr. Chairman, I think Denise may have some insight on that. I saw her raise her hand and turn her mic on.
Yeah, I was
Denise.
waiting for him to finish talking. Just based on conversation this morning with the Planning and Zoning Department, they said that they would have preferred this to have been a soil and erosion plan and a site plan. The site plan being for the building at the front. That's all that was just a conversation that was had. So.
Okay.
So I can just comment on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, again.
Hold on. We'll let Kevin respond.
I just need to make it clear, if we were to pursue a fill permit from the Town of Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission, their regulations only allow for that permit to be issued for 2 years, and it is physically impossible to source and place this much material in a 2-year period. So we could not pursue a fill permit application with the Town of Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission and still meet the desired objective of importing, placing material, and restoring the watershed.
Mr. Chairman, I also would like to address this issue briefly. It's Attorney Finn on behalf of the applicant. I did point out at one of the prior hearings a statute, 8-3J, and section 8.9C of your inland wetland regulations that apply to projects that are greater than 400,000 square feet. And clearly this is one of those projects. And I will elaborate on those remarks in a few minutes. And I believe that I saw a memorandum that Attorney Schellenberg wrote to the commission about that position that I had taken in one of the earlier hearings, where we talked about what the meaning of 8.9C of your regulations was, and how the only logical meaning is that it dovetails with this 8-3J of the general statutes. And I think based on analysis of that, it's going to be clear that these two applications can and should go hand in hand given the size of this project. And with all respect to the planning and zoning staff, I certainly accept that Denise was told that this morning, but really that ultimately is a decision for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they have to hear our arguments on that position as well. So ultimately it's going to be their decision. So there's a lot to, there's a pretty good authority for our position. I'm not going to go chapter and verse. I am going to review it. But I think Attorney Schellenberg has already looked into this issue, probably needs to look at it again. But I just want to let you know there's more coming on this issue.
Okay.
Just to be clear, my memo was commenting on the interpretation of the regulation 8.9C. I don't think that's exactly the same issue as whether there should have been two applications before the Wetlands Commission or one application. Those to me are two different issues. So I just want to make that clear.
Attorney Finn speaking, that's a fair distinction that Barbara's making, but I do think when you look at the two, the statute and the regulation, you have to come to the conclusion that they have to work together on a particular project. And I'm going to elaborate briefly on that when I have a chance to address you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. One last from Russ, I believe you had a comment to say, then we'll drop this topic until Barbara can dig into it a little deeper for us.
Yep.
Right.
We keep missing the point. This is a wetland notice of violation. Nothing to do with planning. It's a wetland violation. The applicant chose this method, which puts them in a position to have to go to planning. When there's feasible and prudent alternatives, you know what? Put the bedrock well in tomorrow, start pumping into the vernal pool, and forget the fill-in and the building and the parking lot and the septic. Because
Okay.
that has nothing to do with the wetland violation, in my opinion.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep.
Okay, so back to Attorney Finn, your next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Bill Kenny is going to next address the commission.
Good evening, Bill Kenny, Principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield, Connecticut, and just want to briefly review with you some responses that I have with regard to the letter that George Logan submitted.
Hold on,
also,
hold on, Bill.
Sure.
I see Clark is here. Let the record show that Commissioner Gingras is now present on the meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Kenny.
Sure. And just want to start again saying that I am 100% confident that this wetland can be restored and restored to a very high level, high functioning. I submitted a presentation to you that wasn't specifically related to this project, but just highlighted many projects that I've been involved with. My experience with this is over 3 decades. I studied wetland restoration at the Yale School of Forestry. That was my focus of studies, hydrology, soils, understanding how water moves through the land. So I've been involved with many projects like this. There's been statements about it, creation versus restoration, that they're apples to oranges. But what's really critical is one piece is how is the water getting to the wetland, and that is apples to apples in creation and restoration for the things that are important. And there are many examples of creation and how to manage water at certain levels, certain times, and having it conveyed to a location where you're either restoring a wetland or creating a wetland. So just wanted to put that out there, that I have very tremendous amount of experience with this and high level of confidence that this will be successful. Next, I want to say that if we will be monitoring this, we've offered monitoring. One great thing is that you do have wetland 4 immediately adjacent. So that's a reference wetland. When we monitor the wetland, the hydrology, we'll be able to look at what are the water levels in wetland 4 and what are the levels in wetland 2. What time periods are they there? And we can adjust the water flows in with regard to pumping. I'm confident once the watershed is established, that won't be an issue. But during pumping, we certainly could monitor this and adjust. And we have a great reference wetland right immediately adjacent. So we'll be getting great data from both the existing wetland or the undisturbed wetland and the wetland that we're restoring. And then the standard, with regard to some comments in George's letter, we've never said that we're going to restore it to exactly what it was in 2006, to mimic Mother Nature to what it was in 2006. And the wetland, if this site had never been disturbed, the wetland today wouldn't be what it was in 2006. There would be changes. There'd be trees that blow over. So there's always changes in the wetland. And as George mentions in his report, the water hydro period, how deep the water is, when it's in the wetland, for how long is it in the wetland, that varies every year with or without disturbance. And so there's no, it's a moving target, that it's impossible to put it exactly what it would be, but we know what the varying conditions are. And again, we have the reference wetland to guide us, and so that we can ensure that this will be successful. And I'm glad to see that an alternative was presented, that with the assumption that this can be done, that the interveners have put forth an alternative with basically the same concept. restore a watershed to some shape or form and restore the wetland. And so that was great to see that. So I think that's really the highlights of what I want to say is I'm very confident this can be done. We will be doing monitoring. Monitoring is critical, and you have adaptive management. If you see things that need to be changed, you change them as you monitor. And that's very easy to do, and it's done in wetland creation. That's a common requirement in wetland creation, and it would be the same here. And you cannot design it to, this isn't rocket science in two different ways. It's not nearly as complicated as rocket science, and also it's not as precise. It is a bit of an art, and the monitoring with a reference wetland right next to this allows for success at a level that is so much higher than creating a new wetland would be. Be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Mr. Finn, anybody else going to speak on the applicant's behalf?
I'm next, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if the commissioners want to ask Mr. Kenny questions now, or you want to hold those for now.
How long are you going to be?
I think I'm going to be about 10 to 15 minutes.
Well, then we'll see if we have some questions then. I'll start with the normal path. Commissioner Spence, questions for any of the presenters so far?
Well, if Kevin is available, I have what I think is a pretty big one for him. It looks like he might not be available. Kevin, are you there? You are there.
I can.
Okay. I've been looking much more specifically at the plans. And one of the things that I'm very concerned with is the change in Wetland 1. Now, there have been a couple of hypotheses as to how that could have happened. But one of the things I noticed, and I want you to clarify one way or the other, is that the original hydrology for Wetland 1 was, I'm going to say the water was funded from the east. And if I'm reading the drainage maps properly, this is pre-development, it all went from east to west. And it fed the wetland from the side. Do you understand what I mean? Okay.
Yes, it was actually, so that was a valley, so it was really fed from both sides. So you have all the development on the other side of Enterprise and actually beyond,
Right. Okay.
to the west. Yeah.
But that leads me to the next part of my question. It appears to me that the way almost all of the drainage is funneled at this moment is away from the head of the wetland at the northern end, and it's all, well, can't say all, a great deal of it is now being channeled and funneled down to the sedimentation bed basins / detention basins that are in the southwest corner of the property, which empty right into vernal pool 1. The water is not being allowed to drain through the wetland itself before it gets down to vernal pool 1. And I'm wondering, and I'm going to ask all of the wetlands experts here, if they think that could have any effect on the change in that vernal pool. I mean, that went from a class tier 1 pool to a pond. And that's a major wetland change, and that is subject to remediation, I would think. So changing the drainage from what was pre-development to what it is being, what is being proposed, I'm not sure that we're comparing or that we're doing it the right way. And that's what I wanted to have the experts weigh in on.
Well, I'll just, opine on that. I think that wetland system is fed, we were a portion of that contributing watershed. There was more watershed contributing to that wetland from the west. So whatever other activity took place on that side of the wetland and on Enterprise Drive is, that effect had other changes to the watershed. The detention basin on the northernmost edge, again, is fed not only from storm drainage from Independence Drive and Enterprise, but also some of those contributing things. All of our discharges that we're proposing There's a pretty considerable portion of the site that drains into an existing detention basin, which is just north of that wetland, that vernal pool system. So that doesn't change any patterns there. We are directing some down a little bit further south, but I don't believe that really, that also is a little bit of upgrading from that wetland system as well. And our systems and our basins have been designed to really match and attenuate those flows. So I don't think that our proposed activities from a development standpoint, if this application is viewed favorably and approved, I think everything we're doing is going to address and fix some of those concerns and try to restore some of those patterns that previously existed.
Well, I would like to see that from a percentage basis, as to which sediment basin or which detention basin is handling what percentage of the water, and where, because it seems to me if it's all being funneled down to vernal pool 1, we're not going to achieve any kind of remediation on that pool, and it'll remain a pond, and that is a great concern for me. So that's why I'm looking for the wetland experts that have. And I see Kenny, Mr. Kenny is looking at something he's examining, and I'm wondering if you have an opinion there.
Just that,
Just say
my
your name for the
understanding.
record. Bill, say your name for the record.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Kevin can correct me if he hears, but my understanding is that the drainage, I do think there was an increase of water there from dewatering of the hole, and that my understanding.
You're frozen. Bill, you
now
froze.
is that dewatering is going to be directed away. That needs to happen when it happens.
You're breaking up.
Am I still there?
You're here, but
I
you're
hear you
breaking
now.
up.
I'm breaking up. Okay.
It sounds
Bill,
okay now.
Okay.
Can you repeat that, please?
Dewatering is going. Sure. That with the proposed plan that the dewatering water will be directed away from wetland 1 to prevent that from happening, to put it back into balance.
Did you confirm that on the plans yourself with the swales and the, I'm just looking at it from a different point of view as to what I can see and where it appears to be aimed and where it used to be. Things that used to go straight east and west are now going west for a while, and then they're going south, and then down into the detention basin. So this is what I'm concerned about that.
All right. My comment was with regard to the pumping. What I'll do, if you have questions for other people, I'll take a minute to look at the drawings with regard to that right now.
I can ask anybody else.
Because your question has surface water flow after the improvements are completed. Is that correct?
During and after.
Okay. Okay.
Ross, did you happen to notice the same thing?
Ross, you there? Chris,
Right.
Sorry, having problems.
There he is.
Got it.
Chris, you're giving us some interference.
Sorry about that. Can you guys still hear or no?
Just mute yourself or something for now. Hold on. Let me just make sure he's not taking Kevin's place right now. Chris, are you here to replace Kevin?
Yeah, so Chris Pulowski for the record, Solely Engineering here. I could help answer some of Lois's questions. Lois, if you wouldn't mind repeating them, I apologize. I was breaking in and out for a minute.
But we'll let Russ is actually addressing the question at this moment, so let him finish. Did you hear the question?
I believe they had to do with superficial water flow, but again, I apologize. I was breaking in and out there.
All right, let's let Russ speak, and then I'll sort the rest of that out after.
The bottom line is there's no way to mimic what nature had before. There's no way. The porosity's different. The densities of soil are different. The way water's going to flow is going to be different. It's a, as I said, I give it a 30% chance of success.
I'm sorry, I wasn't referring to wetland 2 or 3. I was referring to wetland 1 and the way that the drainage from the entire, I guess it's about 40 some odd acres, seems to be directed toward wetland 1. And that's what I wanted you to, from a wetland point of view, to get an opinion from you.
Well, I don't think wetland 1 is being impacted or will be impacted by this plan.
Okay, thank you.
The additional water from dewatering is not a good idea, which I've said since day one.
Okay.
Lois,
right.
has that question been satisfactorily answered?
Yeah, unless Mr. Kenny still has something else to say.
Just two things. One is that we have been approaching this within the context that there was a site plan approved from 2006, done by Dave Bjorklund's office, and that that there will be some development of this property at some point. And when you look at what was approved in 2006, the concept, the flow of water is nearly identical to this. The stormwater basin was in the same location, and that the lower southern part of the property was flowing to that area. And second, as Russ has discussed previously, and other people and myself, that wetland 1 is primarily driven by groundwater, and that by not diverting water that would be going to wetland 2 to wetland 1, plus the fact that it is primarily groundwater driven at its lower portions. And then when you throw in that it's essentially the same concept that was approved in 2006, that I think it's going to be in good shape within that context, that there won't be that the wetland hydro period will be much similar to what it would have been under that approved plan.
And I've said it before that I don't go for that approved plan because it was hypothetical. It was not approved by us, and it didn't happen. So I consider that a non-issue. I'm working about pre-development conditions, not some conditions that might have happened if we did it, which we didn't. So that's my stance. So if according to pre-development conditions, how is this different?
So Lois, Chris Pulaski, for the record, I would be happy to answer that for you. Solely engineering here. So I'm not showing my screen at the moment. I apologize, I'm on mobile, but in pre-existing development conditions, there was approximately 9.71 acres of wetland contributing watershed to the eastern wetlands. That's wetland 2. And there was 31.77 acres contributing to the western wetland. That is wetland 1 that you were talking about, I believe. So again, that is in pre-existing conditions. And then with our proposed plan, 1 second here, I pull the map. So we are restoring that. So now there will be hold on 1 second. There will be 9.94 acres directed towards the eastern wetland. That is again wetland 2. And there will be 32.14 acres directed towards wetland 1. That is the western watershed. So again, the contributing watersheds that we are proposing with this plan will be very close to the pre-existing conditions, not the approved plan, again, the pre-existing conditions.
Okay, thank you. That still doesn't, I hate to keep harping on this, but if the water was coming off from east to west, 1/10 of it went to the top 10, 1/10 of it went to the second 10, third 10, fourth 10, fifth 10, all the way down the line. Now it appears that more than 6/10 of it is being aimed toward the bottom 10. And that's my contention, and that's what I wanted to know. Is that a problem? It would be, because I'm also looking at elevations, and it appears to me that that could be contributing, it will be contributing further to the flooding of that pool, pond, whatever we want to call it. So that's my point.
Okay. Does anybody else want to comment on that, or do we move along with something else, Commissioner Spence? All right, Commissioner Spence, do you have any other questions for anybody?
Oh, yeah. We should ask the other commissioners first, though.
All right, if you want to go last, we'll do that. Starting with, then we'll go to Commissioner Stewart.
I don't have any questions at this point.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gingrich.
The one, sorry, the one question I have, in the northeast part of the project, the development that was sold off, those bridges are all getting removed, correct? Because that has been blocking for years any type of water flow up there anyway. Is that all getting cleaned up and moved out?
That is correct. So if you look in what is within our property there's a wetland restoration area that involves the removing of those bridges.
Yeah, because I mean, right now it's just impacted. It's clogged up there. It's just debris up there. So I just want to make sure that's getting taken care of, because that might help a little bit for the other northeastern part of the property. I just want to make sure that was getting taken care of.
Clark, I'll help clarify that for you. So Chris, that is both on the plan and written in the application, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gingrich. Commissioner Massaraco.
I have no questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Hall.
Yes, I have a question. In the last set of revised plans, this would be a question for the applicant. In the last set of revised plans, the hydration of wetland 2 was going to be changed to the existing bedrock well. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so I went through the latest plan and came up with a number of questions on how that hydration would work. My first question, judging from where the existing bedrock well is to the point where the level spreader is quite a distance across the property and then going north. Do you know how long that 2-inch pipe would be?
That approximately 1,300 linear feet, I believe, but I can double check on that.
And would that be above ground or below ground?
In most areas, it would be below ground to protect against equipment running it over and potentially puncturing it. But on top of the area where we're not proposing to do much, initial disturbance, then that would probably be above ground.
Okay. The reason I'm asking these questions is because this now appears to be the most critical early element towards rehydration. So if we're looking at a time to begin to see an impact on the wetland, this 2-inch pipe running for 1,300 or so feet is the sole means, controlled means that this is going to occur. So that's my reason for these questions. This is the most critical component. If the pipe doesn't work, if the pump breaks or the well goes dry, no hydration occurs. Is that correct?
In the beginning of the process, the well is critical and we'll be monitoring it. It's going to act almost like an irrigation system, if you will. So we'll be able to control and mimic like the average flows that are contributing to that wetland. But in the meantime, if we're leaning towards an approval here, we can have that well operational within a month or two and immediately start to rehydrate that wetland. So that is a critical component in terms of rehydrating that wetland immediately.
Okay. Can you predict the pumping capacity that well has? Will it be sufficient? I mean, we've talked a lot about the water budget.
Hold on, Commissioner Hall. I believe in the last meeting they did report on the capacity of that well.
Okay, I can go back and
if you want that repeated quickly, if someone has it off the top of their head, but I believe they spoke about the flow rate of that well.
Okay, that's okay. If the other commissioners feel it's sufficient, then I'm good. And that was one of my questions, was how long would it take to get it up and running? I think you answered that. The follow-on question is, how many years would it need to run before the fill would take over the natural gradation?
Some year, I mean, we're going to be restoring the watershed as fast as we can, but I would anticipate that it would have to run for 7 to 8 years before the fill was up high enough to, restore the watershed flow patterns that are necessary to completely rehydrate that wetland to the 9.94 acres that we're proposing.
Okay. And in the process of running that well and pumping process for 7 or 8 years, you would put in place the ability to monitor and report on the performance of that?
That is correct.
Okay. That's my question for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Okay, so I think the only thing left is, let me see here. Commissioner Spence, I think you're the only one left with any questions. And also, we do have to open it up to the public comment. I could do that now and give Lois a few minutes. Then you're gonna have to, or do you want to, are you ready? Are you ready?
Well, I'm ready, and the comment, public may, if there were any that's interested, may want to chime in on something.
And if you're ready, then let's continue on with let you wrap it up for the commission, unless anybody else sparks anything they want to ask.
Okay, this is the equivalent of a lot of applications, so wrapping it up quickly is not likely to happen that quickly because there's a lot of loose ends that I'm seeing and a lot of questions that I still have that are important enough to have covered. These are detail. I'm a detail person when it comes down to these things. So these are little details that's where the devil is, and that's the thing I'm aiming at right now. I was looking at the test pit data and Pond 1D. I guess, Chris, this is for you. The one east of the office building, the proposed office building. It said that the pit was miscellaneous fill to 42 inches. Now, what is miscellaneous fill and should we be draining into it?
So the miscellaneous fill is just the quarry screenings, the stone dust, the rock. It's just been compacted there over time. So it's a byproduct of when the quarry was operational. It is a byproduct of that crushing process that's just been placed there.
Okay. Now, I don't know if it was in the maintenance plan. There's been so much material. I started on Saturday and I've already forgotten some of what I've read. So if I'm repeating anything that's already there, please pardon me. We had to add to the maintenance plan. We need minimum yearly reports to the staff and the commission as to where we are and how things are progressing on not just the wetlands issues, but on whatever well, I guess the wetlands issues are what we're most concerned about. Question also, has the materials acceptance plan been changed since August? Or is it the same one that we saw?
The material acceptance procedure has not been changed since August. It's whatever you guys have, which I believe was last revised in August, is the most up-to-date procedure.
Okay. The plans are still indicating silt fence. Now, I had discussed with Kevin earlier, quite a bit earlier actually, about changing and upgrading some of the silt fence areas, especially directly along the wetlands areas, to wattles or silt socks or both. And I noticed down on the plan it's still all silt fence with possibly adding hay bales. And I'm wondering about the wisdom of using hay bales, considering the seed content, especially that of Japanese stilt grass, which can really, I mean, I know in my own yard, if there's any of that there, we're goners. and there's no way any kind of remediation is going to happen unless somebody's out there pulling out every little stupid plant. So,
Commissioner Spence?
yeah.
Commissioner Spence, let me just give you some of my own opinion on that. Hay bales for the long term are not the best idea because they deteriorate within 5 to 6 months, and then there's nothing. So, and silt fence, it's a lot easier to see black again. So it's a easier visual inspection to see that silt fence is still up. So that's my opinion on hay bales. You know,
No, I don't
5,000
like
hay
it.
bales.
I don't like
Okay.
hay bales. I was
Right.
questioning the wisdom of using them because they were in the spec sheet. So
Yeah.
I wanted to just qualify that. And we had also discussed with Kevin the concept of using silk socks or wattle, hay wattle, or some kind of wattle. And I just noticed it wasn't on the detail plan, so I wanted to bring that up to make sure that it had been covered.
Yeah, so we believe that silt fence is the best way forward there, but you know, we would be open to using the straw wattles if you would consider that as a condition of approval. And again, based off what Keith said, you know, I kind of agree that they're easier to spot for maintenance, and the hay will deteriorate over time. So that's why we have that silt fence proposed along that eastern wetland there.
I've just seen so many silt fences that were not maintained the way they said they were going to and failed. And I would hate to see that happen right along with pristine wetlands.
That's why we have Denise.
She's not the inspector. She can go in, but she's not supposed to do the daily inspections.
No, not daily,
No.
but what is it?
There's
No?
also Denise Hall said there's also filter socks that could be used instead of silt fences, and I've seen those successfully
That's what
done.
I'm talking about. Silk socks or
They're silt socks, and you blow organic materials in them. They act as a silt fence, and when everything's done, you cut open the filter and let the organics, you know, fill it with conservation mulch or things like that.
and they work very well.
And they work very well. I've seen them done at a lot of sites.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, I would like some explanation because I don't understand how it's working. But the detention basin opposite the proposed building, I'm not understanding how you can empty the roadway drainage into that pond and then have the outlet for the same pond less than 10 feet away at a lower elevation, if I'm reading this properly. It seems to me that that should take a circuitous route around the detention basin to get in before it exits out into the wetland. Understand that to me? Or am I not reading the inverse properly?
So the detention basin across from the proposed office building, so the one that's to the east of the office building, is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the water throughout the different phases of the project, we're proposing to use the allo control structure in various ways. So there'll be different knockouts, which are basically the inverts of that allo control structure. And in the beginning phases, the lower inverts will not be utilized because we will be utilizing that pond as a sedimentation basin. And as we proceed through the project and do more work, then those outlets or inverts will be opened up and used, as we no longer will need that basin as a sedimentation basin, and then it will turn into a full functioning detention basin. So in the beginning, you know, that basin will act as a sedimentation basin, but as the project progresses and we no longer need it as a sedimentation basin, it will then act as a detention basin. But the water will flow from when the office building is in and all of the driveway improvements are in as well, then that water will flow to a catch basin, to a hydrodynamic separator, which will then go into that basin and then will flow downstream to the level spreader, which is located to the southeast of the proposed office building. So, but the invert of the level at the flared end, the level spreader, I believe is 406, and the invert in the outlet control structure of the detention basin is 408. So that will pitch down to the level spreader. I hope that clears up any confusion you may have, but I'd be happy to explain in more detail.
Well, I guess what I was looking for when in some of the classes that I had taken in the past, talking about,
Lois,
yeah,
Lois,
Yes.
for 1 second, what I'd like to do is I'd like to leave the meeting for a short period of time. Let you, since you're questioning anyways, you take over. I'll be back. But I need to do some things that I wasn't able to do. I'm going to try to stay on. All right.
okay.
Thank you. It's 7:32. Chairman is leaving the meeting temporarily.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, it did, all right, as I was saying, some of the classes that I had taken in the past showed different quality of detention basins, and some of them included creating a circuitous path around the basin so that the water stays in there for a longer period and has more chance to be cleaned before it exits out the other side. They usually are formed in the shape of a horseshoe with a berm in the middle so that it forces the water that comes to go all the way around the horseshoe, get cleaned before it goes out the outlet structure. And this one appears to be that where the inlet is very close to the outlet, like within 15 feet. And even post-construction, you're talking about taking the road water and putting it into the basin, and I was just hoping that it was going to get a little bit cleaner before you put it into the, I mean, I know the hydrodynamic separator, which works at 80% maximum when it's functioning and when it's new, and then it decreases from there on. But I still would like to see cleaner water getting pushed toward the wetlands, and I was wondering if I was completely off base on that.
Yeah, so the hydrodynamic separator, again, will handle most of that, and there is an operation maintenance plan in place to maintain that hydrodynamic separator. So the intent is not to decrease the water quality in the future, but the water will flow through that and into the detention basin, and it's not going to just directly flow right out into the control structure. It will slowly fill that detention basin, and again, during the first few phases of this project, only the grates will be operational, so that detention basin will act as a sedimentation basin. But as the project progresses, that basin will provide the water quality, and then the level spreader will also aid in treating that water. So,
okay.
But I understand what you're saying with the horseshoe pattern. It is an interesting concept. So
I always like to see them. This is just a housekeeping kind of a thing. It would be helpful to have the planting legend on 2.6, also on 2.61 and 2.64, so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth to see what's going where. There's a remediation plan that has been approved on this property. It was approved 5 years ago. When is it going to be done?
So as soon as this project is approved, that will be completed. That's one of the first steps that we will be taking on this property. So that has to do with the Section 4 approval of the subdivision, I believe.
No, this was a newer one. It was 2015. I don't have the exact application date, but I know it was in 2015 because it's noted on the plan that it was previously approved. And I was wondering if perhaps we could upgrade it since it hasn't been done yet.
We intend to restore or to complete that planting, as soon as possible, but we intend to plant it as it was designed and approved at this point. So.
Well, why wasn't it done already? I guess that's part of my question, because I don't know what the date was that was supposed to be done by, but mediations are not usually given 5 years to get done. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, I apologize. Sorry, go ahead.
The Commissioner Spence, it's Arnold Karp. The
ownership went through a change. We have changed the bond. And then in the fall, when we were going to do the work, we were issued a cease and desist. So as soon as we have a global solution, that is on our work schedule. But I can't speak to prior ownership. I can only speak to ours. It took us till the fall of this year to get the bonds and everything brought into the new owners' names.
So noted. Thank you. On sheet, this is another detail thing. On sheet 2.62, we have a conservation mix in the vertical envelope. I guess is somebody calling me? There is the conservation mix, and this is in the vertical envelope. And I was hoping that we could beef up that plan a little bit, add some trees, make it a little beefier since it is in the envelope and we need that for critical habitat. So anybody would like to answer that on the applicant's team?
Yeah, I mean, our planting plan within that area is very robust. There's a magnitude of trees and seed mixes within that area. And I think that combination with the wetland markers, we're really trying to protect that area in the future. So at this time, we're not proposing to add any additional trees or plantings within there because we believe we've covered the area pretty thoroughly. So.
And when is that supposed to be planted?
That won't be planted until the later years of the project. So, you know, as we fill the necessary material to fill the hole, then we will proceed with the planting once that has been restored, those elevations. There really isn't much disturbance being done, if any at all, within that vernal pool envelope at the higher elevations because they're 50 feet higher to 60 feet higher than the bottom of the quarry there. So we will be installing the level spreader and the distribution box and the pump from the bedrock well. But other than that, we're not going in there and clearing or anything by that means. So it's going to be remaining in its natural or current state until later stages of the project.
Okay. Oh, here's one. We're talking about an impervious liner that is either 6 foot or 3 foot underground, depending on where it is located. How is this going to affect the roots of trees? We're talking about an impervious liner, and it seems to me that trees and impervious liners don't usually go along too well. Mr. Kenny, maybe you can answer that.
Right. And you'll find the vast majority of your root system is within the top 2 to 3 feet of the soil, and that on the native soil that was here was included Chatfield soils, which are 3 feet or so deep over bedrock. So we're mimicking that same condition, and so I don't expect any problems with that.
Would any of our other wetland experts like to weigh in on that? How do they feel? Is that going to work?
George Logan for the record. I generally agree with Bill and what he says, especially in this kind of landscape.
Awesome. I love it when the experts agree.
Lois, I'd also like to point out that we are using natural soil. If you look at the revised plans within that 3 foot depth of that impervious liner, we are proposing to use natural soil in that area now.
Okay. When does the the precipitous berm on Independence Drive get removed? What year of the plan? And is there going to be fencing? Now I know that fencing is not part of my or our jurisdiction, but if somebody fell down or fell down there and got hurt or died, and I could have prevented it, I would never live with myself. So I have to ask the question, when is that going to be made more safe? And when does that berm, at what point in the program does that berm get pushed down the hill or wherever it's going to go?
Lois, it's Arnold Karp. I can speak to the fencing, which has been there for 3 weeks, would have been there sooner, but there is no fencing easily available for the amount that we needed on the East Coast. It's all been put up. It's been well installed. It is tight. As far as the berm was put up during our ownership to try to keep the dirt bikes and other people out of the property. So now there's the fence in front of it and the berm behind it. I'd have to check on Chris when that will disappear, but again, it was put in for safety, just like the fence is. It's very hard on weekends and after hours, keeping people off of the property, but the worst parts have all been fenced in and already been, one part has been knocked down. I re-put it back up. But as far as safety, we are all over. We ordered fencing in the summer and literally got it 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it is now made safe, and the signs are back up and everything else.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Yes, and Lois, to answer your question, the berm will be removed in the later years, but to reiterate Arnold's point, we'd like it to remain for now to serve as that additional safety measure because it does do a good job of keeping out the dirt bikes and quads and any other vehicles that may want to enter the property illegally. So.
Okay. What is the elevation of the rehydrating system?
I'm sorry, of the rehydration of the liner?
No, not the liner. I'm sorry, the pump and the pipe. What is the elevation of that?
Just 1 second here. So we place it in the southern end of the wetland too there, because if you remember that wetland flows south to north. So that will hydrate that entire wetland. And I believe, I'm gonna look now, but it's around the 454 to 456 elevation. And that wetland is in the 450 to 451 elevation there, but I can double check on that.
While you're doing that, can you tell me who it was that came up with and prepared the plan for the clay liner? Was that you? Did you do that, or was it somebody else?
Bill Kenny has been actively involved in this project in combination with our office in preparing that or proposing that clay liner as a potential use, or impervious liner, excuse me.
Has it ever been tested? Do you have any projects where you know it works?
We have used similar liners on other projects. We have also used the 40 mil poly, which I know that you are not a fan of, but yes, we have seen projects where we have used both of those types of liners. So, sorry, I apologize. Yeah, you can't see my screen. I'm looking for the elevation of that pump at the moment.
This one's a little bit unrelated. I seem to remember now I could be wrong with a lot of hours of testimony here. Are there any groundwater wells that monitor water that flow through known fill sites? I know that there are wells in various places, but are any of them receiving groundwater from a fill site?
At this moment, there are a number of wells. There are wells. There's an existing deep bedrock well. There's a couple of existing wells on the eastern wetland, or in the western wetland system. And then there's the 2 new wells that we have installed to the north and the south of Wetland 2. But I don't believe at this time, I'd have to ask Derek Jones if there are any wells that are installed within the fill material at this moment.
Is he here?
Don't think that Derek is here at the moment.
Okay.
And to answer your previous question, the level spreader and the diffuser box and the outlet of that pump is at elevation 460, and then it will flow downhill into the wetland, which is at approximately elevation 450 to 452.
Okay.
This is Jane Warren, attorney for the applicant. I can answer Lois's question if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Okay, Lois, there are wells on the down gradient side of the property. So any impact, any material that, all the soil materials, the fill piles were tested and all complied with standards. And if there were anything in the groundwater, the down gradient wells would pick that up, and they've all come back fully compliant.
Okay, but do we know that all the water is, how am I going to say this? We do know that just because it's down gradient doesn't mean it's receiving water, and that was proved by the fact that we have wetland 2 and 3 and 4 up on the upper part, and they're not, you know, the down gradient area is not receiving their water. So do we know that these wells that you're referring to are actually receiving water from the filled areas? Does that make sense?
They would be receiving water from everything, the fill areas, the natural areas on the down gradient side. They'd take whatever had leached vertically down into the groundwater and then flows cross gradient across the site. So if there were an impact from the fill or from an upstream neighbor or from anywhere else, it would be showing up in the down gradient wells, and all of them tested clean.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lois, I'd like to also add that we do semi-annual chemical analysis testing on the surface water runoff that's related to the Connecticut DEP permit that we have. And that has all come back clean. We've tested it a number of times every 6 months. We're due for a test soon here. And every time that we have tested it, it has come back clean. And there are many different locations throughout the site that we have tested that water. So, and again, that is the surface water discharge. So that's where the material, the fill material that you're referring to, that would be an indicator of that.
This one is, I looked at the plan that Mr. Bjorklund had presented on behalf of the applicant. And in some ways now, as Kevin said, that it's not fleshed out, it's strictly a conceptual plan. And it actually kind of follows one of the things that I have been trying to suggest from the beginning, which was filling from east to west instead of from north to south. And I wanted to bring it up again, as I have brought up several times, that I still don't understand why it was when Mr. Sullivan and others questioned the quantity of fill and the height at which it was proposed, that they suggested it could be cut down a little bit. I think that what they meant was just chop it off the top, not to take the whole thing and spread it all the way across. I still have a major concern with the liner and all of that area that is on a very minor slope. So much of it is on the other property and could possibly be built on. It seems to me that it's a possibility and an alternative to bring all of the filling only to, not all of the filling, but bring the crest of the hill that would be necessary to the edge of the property line of Independence. Keep it off of Independence, but bring it only up to the edge of 64 Cambridge, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and start your slope from there. That way it would keep the remediation portion of this and the required watershed that's coming down to that property. And it would not require as much filling. I'm concerned about the amount of filling. I know everybody's concerned about the amount of filling. So any way that we could cut it off, that that's would be a possibility in my mind. Something else that came to mind is something that one of our commissioners brought up very early on, and he said, what happens if you just fill the hole and use the property that way? And that was, I believe, the original plan that was supposedly approved, which I don't even want to go there, but there was this plan that has been brought up many times about the two buildings and how they're going to level it all off and blah, 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 and they're going to put these two buildings up coming from 64 Cambridge. And that's an alternative. What happens if we just fill the hole or fill it to maybe 415 or 420, allowing for groundwater fluctuations, and then leave the side as obviously secure it and make it stable and everything, however you want to. Have your watershed start from the edge of 64 Cambridge and head down from there. These are all just alternatives, and I brought them up several times and they were never mentioned really, or they were either dismissed, forgotten about, or whatever. But they are, I think there's other ways to do this. I'm not sure that this is the right way. I don't know that it isn't the right way. But I wanted to just put that out there on the record so that everybody could hear and comment on whatever it is that this is supposed to be a remediation plan. And if there's other ways to form the remediation without as much, the other stuff is a P&Z stuff. It's not a wetland stuff, but you're looking for wetlands permission for P&Z stuff. And it's like, I can't justify the whole thing in my head. So that being said, I will let you jump on that one.
Yeah, so sorry. Just to speak on that, I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the plan that the intervener proposed accomplishes the goal that we are looking to do, but it doesn't make the process go any faster. There was no specifics to it. And also it leaves the hole still exposed because they didn't suggest raising that elevation at the bottom of the hole. And also, if we just filled the hole into like 420 and left the 50-foot cliff, then that would not restore the pre-existing watershed, which is the goal of our application. So those alternatives are not feasible and prudent. They don't do anything in terms of speeding up the process. And we believe, and we said this from day one, that our plan, we believe, is the best plan forward for this property. And then again, our goal is to restore those watersheds to that wetland, and this is the way that we have to do it. And if you remember, originally we were looking to fill this into about the 484 to 482 contour, and we've lowered it down to 466 in response to commissioner comments. But we need to get the elevation of that hole up out of the groundwater, and we need to raise it all the way up so that we can restore those watersheds to that wetland. And the plan proposed by the intervener, there's really no way to do that any quicker, and especially they're insisting that we use natural material to do that. There is no 1 million cubic yards of natural material available instantly. To source that would be a ridiculous task and would take years. So I'm not sure how that would speed up the process by any means. So we believe that our plan is the best. We've looked at the alternatives, and the plan that was approved in 2006 dramatically cut the watershed to that wetland too. And I would just like to point that out. So we have looked at the other alternatives, but we believe again that our plan is the best way forward for this property. And with our goal is to restore the watershed to that wetland too. And we definitely need to do that. So,
Madam Vice Chair, if I may. I can't, you're muted, unfortunately. There you are.
For a second. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Green.
So the intervener just has follow-up questions to the comments by the consultants for the applicant. And we just have very brief questions, and Mr. Logan has to leave to go to another. So if you would indulge us just briefly, 5 minutes or 4 minutes.
Okay, Mr. Logan, let's see if you can do it in 4 minutes and counting.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, this is the first time I have to do 2 meetings in the same night. But at any rate,
Everybody else, it seems.
Foley's doing the same. One of the questions that I had, I know that, the plan has been modified so that now we have a program to the southern part of Wetland 2, Vernal Pool 2. And I did not see in the record, although it might have been alluded to a little bit by Mr. Soley, of a current or recent analysis of yield or capacity of the well that they want to use. How's it doing now? Also, I had also said this in my letter, if there's any testing that has been done regarding the pH of that and the mineralogy and chemistry of that particular water. I mentioned sulfides might be a concern based on the geology of the area. So those are some of the things that I was asking if they were in the record, and I haven't seen them, and I thought those were important.
And I just want to follow up.
Commissioner Spence, excuse me, Commissioner Spence. I believe that Commissioner Hall asked that question. Perhaps Mr. Logan was off our Zoom at that time about the capacity of the pump, and that Bill Kenny also addressed the pH issue. And we're going to be here an awful long time if the same question that's already been asked gets asked again. So I think that's already on the record. If I'm incorrect, then you'll correct me, I'm sure. But I do think we need to move things along. I do also want to make a comment about the plan, the conceptual plan submitted by the intervener just within the last couple of days. 2 comments. Number one, a conceptual plan by its very nature cannot be deemed to be a reasonable and prudent alternative. It's purely conceptual, and there's no indication that that concept is going to be formulated into a plan that actually works. So it can't be reasonable and prudent, as a conceptual plan cannot meet that burden. I also think it's fair to point out to the commissioners that the intervener's been involved in this case, I think Attorney Green said since May or June. And to wait 6 or 7 months to then present a conceptual plan 2 days before we all know, or 3 days before we know this hearing has to be closed, I think speaks to the credibility of the intervener, which I'll get into when I get to my remarks, that they're really not about trying to improve things. Otherwise, they would have come in with not a conceptual plan, a real plan, and they would have submitted it much, much earlier in the proceedings. So I just want to get that out on the record, and I thank you, and I'll wait my turn now. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to comment that, first of all, Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Spence asked if there was a capacity analysis done. It was alluded to that there had been provided, but we don't see that anywhere in the record, and we don't see any capacity analysis. And as to the conceptual plan, our conceptual plan was in response to comments by the applicant and various commissioners, and that's why we provided it. Obviously, it does not have final detail, as we indicated earlier. It is to show that there are alternatives to be considered. And finally, in order to wrap up our questions, Mr. Glass just had a follow-up, and I think that would be all we have. One comment before Mr. Glass goes, though, is we never suggested that our proposed alternative has 1 million yards of fill, and it's just a fraction of that. But we suggested just grading, as the commission has suggested, from east to west. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Glass.
Thank you. I just had a comment about the the evaluation of the groundwater quality as impacted by the existing fill at
You
the
need to
site.
put your name on the record, please.
So, this is Evan Glass, Alter Environmental for the intervener. A
Also,
comment.
the record say, so I'm back in the meeting. Keith Romano, Chairman.
Welcome back. My comment is, I'll keep it short. It has to do with whether the groundwater quality assessment is adequate. It's very short on data. There's just 2 monitoring wells, and they are both located a very long distance from where WSP investigated most of their fill. I believe they're approximately 1,000 feet away from the bulk of their borings where they had fill. Somebody asked whether there was a monitoring well in the fill. Well, one of their borings, B1, seemed to penetrate all the way into groundwater. The lowest 2 samples were described as wet, which is typically what is referred to, the typical field indication of groundwater. And that was right in the central area of all their borings to investigate the fill, and they chose not to put a monitoring well there. And if they wanted to really know what the quality of the groundwater was as potentially impacted by the fill, that would be the place, that would be a very good place to put the monitoring well. It was also near their test pit 7, where they found their exceedance of the lead criteria that statistically was not an exceedance, but on an individual sample basis was. And so the comment is, and I'm hoping maybe Russ can weigh in on this regarding whether he believes that the groundwater quality evaluation presented is adequate, in his opinion, for evaluating the potential for impacts of to groundwater from the estimated 100,000 cubic yards of fill that are on the site, with those 2 monitoring wells located such a great distance from the rest of the investigations. Thank you.
Russ, you like to respond?
Yep. I think the work that WPS did, is it WPS? I always mess that up.
WSP.
WSP. I think the work they did is adequate to prove that there's no major issue with groundwater or the fill. It's a DEP issue. That information should be provided to the state and let the state deal with that.
Thank you, Russ. We've probably heard that a dozen times now. Thank you. The one thing I'd like to, oh man, it wasn't Russ's first suggestion about the using that well to hydrate the wetlands. So if we have, if we're questioning that concept, the question, whether it works, whether it was a good idea, Russ is the one who suggested it to us. So we should be directing any questions on that to him as well as the applicant. Commissioner Spence, were you still asking questions?
No, I believe I've pretty much asked them all. Thank you.
That is great. Any other commissioners have any other questions? Just chime in. All right, we got to give the public one more opportunity to ask questions or make comments in this application. Does anybody in the public have any comments or questions about this application in any form? Pro,
Mr.
con?
Chairman,
Yes.
Russ Lorenzo Arcadis, have just one question.
Sure.
If these pipes from the well to the vernal pool are going to be above ground, what happens in the winter? Do they freeze?
Oh.
Yeah, so in the winter, we would probably bury the pipes below the frost line just to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we'll ensure that the pipes don't freeze in order to rehydrate that wetland.
So why not build it so it doesn't freeze in the first place? I don't understand that answer.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. again, that's going to be up to the contractor on site and the applicant. And we'll make sure from the beginning that those pipes will be operational throughout the entire process. So in the beginning, if that involves burying them below the frost line, then we'll make sure that happens.
But the plan you proposed to permit to the commission does not state that. So they can only vote on what's in front of them. And that's what's in front of them.
Steve Finn, for the record, I think that could be taken care of by a condition of the approval that the pipes must be buried. So if that really is a concern, I think that's an easy way to handle that issue.
Okay.
But the way to handle an issue is not to have 50,000 conditions to a permit, which leaves the permit open to appeal. So to the commission, you have a plan before you. You need to vote on what's before you. And I caution you about having too many conditions because there's been court cases, and I'm not a lawyer, but I read court cases a lot, where if there's so many conditions to an approval, you shouldn't have approved it. I'm just making that statement.
Thank you, Russ. Okay, so back to what I was doing, the public comment. Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Okay, anybody in this public want to speak in support of this application? Does anybody in the public want to speak about this application in a general nature? Does anybody in the public have any questions for the applicant or the intervener or any other specialist that's spoken tonight? Is that somebody? Oh, okay. It doesn't look like it. All right, so Mr. Finn, I think it's your turn to wrap it up.
Yes, and I think Mr. Carp may want to make a few statements after I'm finished. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, it's Steve Finn for the applicant. First of all, I do want to thank all the members of the commission and the staff for their efforts and over these many months and weeks in listening to this application. I think you've done a tremendous job. I know it's not easy. And I know on behalf of the applicant and our team, we really appreciate your attention and your dedication. I first got involved with regard to this matter around the early fall of 2019. That was well over a year ago, months before this application was filed and before the notice of violation was issued. Before the application was filed, I attended meetings with members of the Planning and Zoning Commission with the idea of trying to come up with a new zone for this property so that it could be developed and become a contributing property to the town of Monroe. I also had one or two meetings in which your first selectman was in attendance. And I certainly had a couple of meetings with you, informal meetings regarding the notice of violation that had been issued. The overarching message that came out of all those meetings was that this huge hole on a property in Monroe needed to be filled and made productive, and that serious attempts be made to have the property restored to its prior permitted condition to the extent possible. Again, the requests from these entities and the discussions all focused in on filling the hole, not partially filling it, but filling the hole and restoring the wetlands. In response to the notice of violation, as I mentioned, we had a couple of meetings, informal meetings with you, the members of the Inland Wetlands Commission. And at that time, no member of our team ever disputed that there were violations on this property. Our nose was out of joint because these violations had existed for at least a decade before the notice of violation was issued. Obviously had occurred before my client took ownership of the property. But the point is that we did not come in and say, you know what, we're objecting to this. There are no violations. We acknowledge there were violations. And further to that, over that decade or so, probably longer, no one had made curing these violations a priority whatsoever. These violations had existed for a very long time, and no one from the town said boo about them. But as we said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't rightfully try to correct them. But I want to give a sort of bit of a time frame here about what we're talking about. So in response to that, the project engineer, Kevin Soley, said he was going to analyze the notice of violation, analyze the property in connection with Bill Kenny, and come up with a plan to meet those two goals, filling the property and trying to restore the wetlands. And Kevin did that along with Bill. And that plan was vetted to all of you before we even filed the application. He gave you a sort of informal review of what it was going to do, what it was going to take, and how long it was going to take. And my recollection is he made it fairly clear right from the get-go that filling this hole was going to take years and years to accomplish. So I wanted, and the plan before you basically mirrors what Kevin outlined at the time we were discussing the notice of violation. So there's really no surprises here. And we've done what we said we were going to do. Now, to my way of thinking, despite the Johnny-come-lately alternative plan that we got, conceptual plan we've gotten from Mr. Borkland in the last 3 days, which again is conceptual and certainly has not been proven to be feasible or reasonable, that throughout the many months and weeks that we've been here, no one has come up with a better alternative plan. No one. No one's come up with a suggestion on how better to rehydrate wetland 2 or how better to rehydrate the vernal pool. So, you know, and we heard today from Mr. Borkland that he thinks it is very conceivable, and from the interveners team that it is very conceivable to rehydrate wetland 2. So I want to sort of bring us back to reality here. Now, I also want to talk about a few specific issues that are out there. Now, I think some of these have been put to rest, so bear with me if you agree that they've already been put to rest. But there is a record here. I'm of the view that if you approve this application, the intervener is going to take an appeal no matter what. So I need to put things on the record. And frankly, if these are open issues for you, it may help to help you to not worry about them. So the first issue is the time to complete the project. Now, as I mentioned earlier tonight, the Connecticut legislature, in its wisdom, has recognized in the Connecticut general statutes that large zoning projects and wetland projects take more years to complete than smaller ones. That makes sense. The bigger the project, the more fill, the larger the area to be developed, the longer the application is going to take and the project's going to take. So the legislature, in its wisdom, passed this 8.3J, and I promise you, I'm not going to read to you the statute, but I am going to paraphrase it. What 8-3J says is it requires a zoning commission or other municipal agency to grant an expiration date for a site plan approval of not less than 5 years, nor more than 10 years, when the project has an area equal to or greater than 400,000 square feet. 400,000 square feet, I'm sure you engineers out there know better than me, but I think that's about 10 acres. Now, Attorney Schellenberg's recent memo stated, we submit that 8.9C of your Monroe's inland wetland regulations is intended to work hand in hand with 8-3J, that statute I just referred to. So 8.9C of Monroe's inland wetlands regulations specifically recognizes that when you have a project involving land of 400,000 square feet or more, and it will take more than 5 or 10 years to complete. So 8-9C, like 8-3J, requires that a wetland permit for large projects such as this one have an expiration date of between 5 and 10 years when it is coupled with a site plan application. And that is why Kevin Soley has said that we need both. We need the site plan and the inland wetlands applications to run together in order to have the time to do this project. So as I said, here the land involved is much larger than 400,000 square feet. It's about 7 times that in size, and involves in obtaining and placing fill to do the project that we think is best of over 900,000 cubic yards. Thus, the project more than meets the criteria for a 10-year permit and under the general statutes for a site plan approval. Remember, without the site plan application, a 10-year wetland permit is not authorized. Furthermore, as Chairman Romano noted at a couple of hearings ago, obtaining the amount of fill necessary for this project will be far from easy, will be subject to real restrictions on availability, and will take a lot of time. And I think that applies whether you're talking about 500,000 square feet of cubic yards or 900,000 cubic yards, 900,000 square cubic yards. So if there ever was a project, and I think someone said that this is the largest project by far that Monroe has ever seen, that if there was ever a project that required a 10-year approval, it's this, and that in working in tandem with planning and zoning, that is what we need for this project. Now, look, I know we all would like the project to be done more quickly. Certainly the property owner more than anyone wants the project completed as quickly as possible. He has every incentive to try to get this project completed tomorrow if he could, because right now the property is not generating revenue. And the development of the property is crucial to making this investment profitable. But again, given the size of the project and the amount of fill required, the 10-year time frame is to be expected. Now, I know a commissioner or two have expressed concern about a 10-year approval and have suggested separate approvals for each phase of the 3 phases that Mr. Soli's plan contemplates, or separating the site plan from the approval for filling the hole and restoring the wetlands. I respectfully suggest that those will cause, that if you were to split this into phases or split this off from the site plan, that will result in unnecessary problems in completing these articulated goals of filling the hole and restoring the wetland. As Kevin has said repeatedly, the site plan is simple and straightforward. The complexity of this application really emanates from the restoration aspect of the project. So I don't understand the need to separate the site plan from the restoration plan. In addition, my understanding is that the work solely associated with the site plan for the 2 buildings will not significantly reduce the time to complete the filling of the hole and the restoration of the wetlands. So it is likely that 10 years is needed whether you split the application or not. Now, Kevin or Chris can elaborate that if you have questions about it. In addition, having the applicant submit a new application for each phase is dangerous and will most likely cause the project to take a lot longer than 10 years. And here are the reasons for that. 1, the intervener appears likely to appeal any approvals, and I will address the intervener's claim specifically in a few minutes. But I think you as the commission have to anticipate an appeal by the intervener of any and all approvals. An appeal of any approval by this commission to the Superior Court of the state of Connecticut would take approximately 18 months to 2 years, perhaps longer, to resolve, and maybe even longer. So if you grant the first phase and there's appeal taken, that's going to hold up the application for the second phase 18 months to 24 months. And if when the application for the second phase is approved, the intervener will probably file another appeal, which will take 18 months to 2 years to resolve. No property owner is going to go forward with the permitted work while an appeal is pending. It just doesn't make economic sense to do that. So if you were to require 3 separate applications for each of the 3 phases, as each phase is approved, it is likely to be appealed and the work will be held up until the appeal is resolved. Thus, the project could be held up for 16 years or 18 years. In addition, going back to getting the fill necessary for this project, no owner is going to want to stockpile the fill for an approved phase which is under appeal. So this commission and the town's goal is to restore the property as soon as possible. To require a new application separately as each phase is concluded is a mistake and will only delay achieving the ultimate goal. I think we've established that a 10-year approval can easily be monitored by not only by the applicant, by independent experts, as well as the town. the bottom line is that the legislature would not have passed a statute requiring at least a 5-year approval and as much as a 10-year approval for a project of this size if it didn't think such a time frame was necessary and workable. Now, I want to address a few other discrete issues. First, I want to address a concern raised by Margaret Miner of the Rivers Alliance. As you know, there have been many hearings on this application, and I am pretty sure that Ms. Miner has not heard all the testimony or read all the reports. Russ Dorenzo, the independent hydrogeologist, stated clearly and unequivocally that this project on the subject properties will have no or negligible impacts on other wetlands, streams, and rivers. And I refer you to Exhibit 46, which is Mr. Giorenzo's report, where he says, and I quote, the filling of the quarry will have a negligible impact on the watershed because water is not being diverted to another watershed. In addition, the impacted area is very small when compared to the entire watershed. Moreover, a Korean water company who has a paramount interest in protecting our drinking water recently received notice of the application when it was filed, had a site visit, and has expressed no concerns with the proposed project. And finally, at the last hearing, Derek Jones of WSP confirmed what Mr. Giorenzo said, that there are no reasons to be concerned about water flowing off-site. And importantly, WSP conducted thorough testing throughout the site and confirmed there were no concerns about contamination. Now, the next issue I want to talk about is the water that is collected as a result of the construction in the deepest part of the property. There was a point where the intervener was arguing that that was a water course and was required to be protected. Now, I haven't talked about that issue recently, and I think hopefully it's not an issue, but I do want to address it briefly. Bill Kenny, a well-respected wetland scientist, stated on the record, it is not a water course or a wetland. In the Southwest Conservation District report issued to you on the bottom of page 15, it states, the report by William Kenny Associates is fairly thorough, and soil scientists who visited the site on behalf of the Southwest Conservation District agreed with the soil assessments by Mr. Kenny. Even the intervener soil scientist, Mr. Logan, did not disagree that experienced and well-respected experts could come to the legitimate conclusion that this area is not a water course. We maintain that it is not a water course, and the legislative history supports the view that merely because there is a hole with water does not make it a water course. Otherwise, a catch basin, a foundation being constructed for a basement or underground parking garage that fills with water, a swimming pool, or even a large puddle on someone's lawn would technically meet the definition of a water course. So this commission, from what I've seen from other applications, does not consider every hole that has water in it to be a water course that is worthy of protection. So a quick example is just last week, you had before you an application, it's numbered IWR 2020-02, 224 Guinea Road, which involves a notice of violation. The application as proposed to you for that remediation involves filling an actual pond. Well, that was not viewed with any objection from the commission, meaning that the greater good is to restore the wetland, not to preserve this pond. And that pool, by the way, is much closer to a protected wetland than the hole that we're talking about with regard to the current applicant's property. I also note for the record that the engineer who submitted that application for Guinea Road is Dave Borkland, the same engineer the intervener retained to contest this application. Now I want to talk about fill for a minute. Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to go through this as quickly as possible. These are all sort of issues that I thought were floating out there that needed to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Finn, but just remember that it's been stated multiple times that the fill import is a P&Z and a DEP issue, except for I think in regards to the area that's going to be under the 411 elevation.
So let me address that briefly then, Mr. Chairman. I hear what you say. Mr. Dorenzo, I think, said it best a few hearings ago. An inland wetland commission has the authority over the placement or location of fill, so that the placement of the fill does not result in impacting the wetlands or their function. However, there is no authority that we have found that allows an Inland Wetland Commission to require the fill to be cleaner than that required by the DEEP. Your regulations and those of other municipalities, Inland Wetland Commissions, usually don't define fill. And I believe that is because the cleanliness of a fill and whether it is sufficiently free of contaminants is solely the jurisdiction of the DEEP, not any Inland Wetland Commission. And that is why the material acceptance procedure, which was, I think, Commissioner Spence just asked about earlier today, has been submitted to the DEEP for review. If they're not happy with the material acceptance procedure, they're going to let us know. That is your protection that the fill coming to this site is going to be sufficiently clean of contaminants to be properly placed on the site. Now, Mr. Glass's obsession with the fill in this application to an Inland Wetlands Commission has been a complete red herring and wasted inordinate amounts of time. Now, I want to move on to the intervener. I want to address the notice of intervention. The standard for intervention requires a showing with credible evidence that with respect to the pending application, the proposed project involves conduct which is likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, or destroying the public trust in the air, water, or other natural resources of the state, unless remedial measures are taken. Again, unreasonably polluting, credible evidence. The intervener has completely failed to meet this burden. They have focused on the quality of the fill to be placed, which is not an appropriate topic for them to raise to an Inland Wetlands Commission. They have said the plan may not succeed in rehydrating the wetlands. Mr. Logan said on repeated occasions it only has a 50% chance of success, though we heard tonight that the conceptual plan submitted by the intervener is to restore the wetlands. But none of their comments or opinions have said that the proposed application is likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, or destroying the wetlands. All they have said is it may not work, and they have never said the plan is likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting watercourses, vernal pools, or wetlands. That is the standard that they have to meet, likely to unreasonably pollute. The fact that there are previous violations on this property that we're seeking to remedy does not give them intervener status. They have to show you in connection with this application that our plan has an unreasonable risk of polluting wetlands, etc. If this was not enough evidence for you, Mr. Dorenzo, the independent expert of Arcadis, and SWCD, the Southwest Conservation District, both of whom are impartial, have never stated to my knowledge that the proposed activity will result in unreasonable pollution or negative impact to the wetlands. And I want to read another sentence from Mr. Diorenzo's report to you of Exhibit 46. It was received on November 17, 2020. And what he writes on the first page is, the filling of the quarry to the original grade will not have an adverse impact on surrounding inland wetlands or watercourses. Now, I grant you, he said the plan only has a 30% chance of working, but that's not equivalent to saying it's going to cause unreasonable pollution. So again, the primary purpose of this project is to restore the property and improve the environment. It is amazing to me, and it should be to you, that the intervener has offered no real alternative suggestions on how better to rehydrate this wetland. They've adopted basically our plan as of tonight. Typically, if an intervener is really concerned about the environment, he makes suggestions on how to approve the plan early on in the process. Here at best, the intervener waited over 7 months before making comments, and at the last minute, all in an attempt to require you and the applicant to start all over again. That's what they want. They want delay. The intervener, Mr. Metropolis, has been complaining to various other commissions and departments for well over a year. None of his complaints resulted in any action. We've invited him repeatedly through council to work collaboratively with us, but they have never offered an alternative approach. This
Excuse
claim
me,
that
Mr.
he's.
Finn, Mr. Finn,
Yes.
I want to ask a question, and more likely to Barbara. What is this one's kind of got me a little perplexed. As this commission, could we have received alternate plans other than the applicant to consider?
It's a question of feasible and prudent alternatives. That's what the issue is. And so the intervener is saying, I believe this is a feasible and prudent alternative. And now Attorney Finn is arguing an opposing view.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So again, just as an understanding, they're speaking of this last minute alternative, okay, from the intervener. But we understand that there is an alternative that was presented, right? And we're not here to evaluate that, right? We're here to evaluate the plan in front of us, right? And knowing that there's an alternative from another, professional engineer, it leaves us with, yes, there's another alternative, whether it's a good one or not. But we keep on coming back to, or Mr. Finn keeps coming back to this other, plan by the intervener, at the end of this process. How do we say, oh, we want that plan? How can we make a judgment on their application by commenting on the intervener's plan, if that's possible or not? I guess is my question.
It's not as though the intervener's plan is being presented to you like an applicant and you're going to say you're going to approve that plan. It enters into the conversation or the deliberation, so to speak, when you consider whether what the applicant has presented is something that you want to approve or not.
Okay, so that plan from,
do you think there's a feasible and prudent alternative, in other words?
so that plan from David Bjorklund's office is part of the record now?
Yes, it's part of the record.
Okay. All right. I think that kind of answers the question.
So, Mr. Chairman, the point is, Mr. Chairman, that the point, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that, they're critical of our plan, but there is they haven't presented a feasible alternative, and they haven't tried to adjust our plan, which we think is by far the best plan. They've come in at the last minute and suggested a conceptual plan. So the point is that we think our plan is the best available to accomplish these goals. And I do think, as Barbara has said before, the credibility of the experts is important to you in evaluating the positions in this application. And with that said, I want to point out to you something that Mr. Dorenzo said in his remarks at one point. He said there is an area on the intervener's property, Mr. Metropolis's property, that has undergone some development that has contributed and is contributing to the degradation of one or two wetlands on the applicant's property. That's in the northeast corner. And I know Commissioner Gingras asked a question about the northeast corner tonight, but as Mr. Diorenzo observed during the site walk, there's another area that has been impacting the wetlands on the applicant's property that is on the intervener's property. So the point is, if the intervener is truly concerned about the wetlands and vernal pools on the applicant's property and the environment in general, why hasn't the intervener and his experts come up with an application to restore the area on the intervener's property so that it's no longer causing damage to the wetlands on the applicant's property? Instead, the intervener has raised a lot of red herrings about the applicant's project, but has not come up with his own proposal to remediate his own property.
Mr. Finn, excuse me,
yes.
Mr. Finn, I do believe that the intervener's property or the intervener had a notice of violation. Denise could comment on this afterwards.
Yeah, I would like to comment on it after.
Thank you. He did address it. And I think we've known, it's been presented to us that the previous owner of both pieces of property was the same person. So I don't know where you're going with that. I think as far as the notice of violation on the other piece has been addressed. But Denise, if you could chime in now.
Yes, the question is that there were the two bridges. One bridge is on the interveners and one is on the quarry site. The interveners has removed the bridge and they did the remediation. The other bridge is on the quarry site, and because of the who owns it and who doesn't own it, when it was one property, it was all owned by one. Now it's on two different properties. The intervener took care of theirs. The one that's there is actually the one that's on the quarry.
So perhaps I misunderstood some of the comments earlier in the hearings, but I was led to believe, I thought that there's still a problem on the intervener's property that is contributing to degradation on the
No, I think
wetlands.
you're referring to the bridge that's on the quarry property, which Kevin has addressed as being removed and remediating the area. He has it on the
Yes.
plans and it's been noted as such.
And thank you. And also,
I'll move on, but that's,
But
I mean, I think I asked Mr. DiOrenzo about that, and I specifically, he said it, and then I followed up with a question, and I thought the answer is that there's still being problems caused on the intervener's property. So maybe merely removing the bridges was not sufficient remediation to stop the impact to the inland wetlands and watercourses on the applicant's property. But
I don't know about the answer, but I don't know when anybody went onto the intervener's property to go find where that other bridge was, because that's well into the property.
Well, again, I mean, there are aerial photographs, and I thought Mr. DiOrenzo said that, but if I misquoted him, I apologize. I don't think I did. I followed up with a question about that, and I believe he said yes. It's on the northeast side of the property, and it's on a neighboring property, and that's still causing degradation. But point is, I've made my point. I'll move on. It's not. I don't think it's crucial. So I am going to wrap up soon, I promise. So I sincerely submit that the plan now before you is the best one possible to fill the hole, conserve and preserve the wetlands, and to allow the property to be developed and become a productive addition to the town of Monroe. I think for all the reasons I previously expressed, tying this application to the site plan is absolutely necessary, and that a 10-year approval of this application is just a practical reality. Requiring separate applications or multiple applications for each phase is going to cause an inordinate and unwarranted delay. Now, from your perspective, the one troublesome aspect of the application is whether it will succeed in rehydrating wetlands 2 and the vernal pool. I don't ignore the fact that a credible expert, Mr. DiOrenzo, has stated that he thinks the plan to restore wetland 2 and the vernal pool only has a 30% chance of succeeding. But I think it's very important to remember the following. One, after Mr. DiOrenzo expressed his opinion, Bill Kenny, who is an expert on wetlands, explained in detail why he strongly believes the plan will work. Since the last hearing, Bill has submitted numerous examples of projects that he has designed that has resulted in the restoration of wetlands. Granted, those projects are not a guarantee that this project will be successful, but they certainly demonstrate that Bill has a proven track record of success in analogous projects and that he has credibility. Even the wetlands expert for the intervener, George Logan, expressed the belief that the submitted plan has a 50-50 chance of success that W2 would be rehydrated. And as I said, Mr. Borkland's conceptual plan also has to support the view that rehydrating this wetland is doable. Now, all the experts agree that it's far better for the environment to restore a wetland and a vernal pool than to try and create one, or to, as mitigation, to contribute to an environmental fund. Chris Sullivan said it tonight. He said, by far the ultimate goal here is to try to restore the existing wetland. And of course, we know that wetland 2 has not been destroyed. still has very healthy and viable vegetation characteristic of a wetland. So this is not an instance where a landowner filled a wetland. Instead, water was inadvertently diverted so it didn't flow into wetlands. So, there hasn't been any alternative plan about how to rehydrate this wetland, despite the gold standard of restoring this existing wetland. So here's an important point. Granted, no one can disagree that that duplicating nature, something that nature created thousands of years ago, is not possible. But I respectfully submit that is not the standard by which to gauge this application. That would be an impossible standard to meet for anyone who wanted to remediate, restore wetlands, that they have to duplicate what nature made. No, and so, for example, that 224 Guinea Road application that I mentioned that was before you last week, that has filtered over wetlands, damage that occurred over many, many years. That application will not result in restoring the wetlands to the way that nature created, but it is a viable approach and it has a good chance for success and improving the wetland. So last point, and I think the most crucial one, and I hope you're listening. So over the weekend, I was thinking about this a lot, and I had what I would call a light bulb moment, and it's very simple. And I hope will give you the peace of mind to approve this application. If you approve this application and give us a chance to achieve that ultimate goal of restoring this wetland, which everybody says is best, your approval is not a statement that the notice of violation has been satisfied. So, in other words, if this project does not turn out to succeed in restoring the wetland and the vernal pool, the violation would still exist. And you would have every right to either issue a new notice of violation or to summon the owner of the property before you again and state, you know, your plan did not work. You still have to remediate that violation. Wetland 2 has not been adequately restored. The vernal pool has not been adequately restored. You need to come up with another plan or an alternative to remediate immediately. So the point is, given the priority that restoring the wetlands is the ultimate goal here, the one you want to achieve over creating new ones or paying money into a fund, give this plan a chance. If it doesn't work, the violation still exists. And you're free to continue to do what you do best, and that is to try to make sure your wetlands and watercourses are adequately protected and remediated. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, this is my very last point. I apologize. If one or more of you are on the proverbial fence about an approval, I would ask you to please read section 10.4 of your inland wetlands and watercourse regulations, which states in part, in the case of an application which is denied on the basis of a finding that there may be a feasible and reasonable prudent alternative to the proposed regulated activity, which would have less impact on wetlands and watercourses, the commission shall propose on the record in writing the types of alternatives the applicant may investigate. So I'm confident that you will not have to do this, as this is the best plan available to rehydrate this wetland. It may not be perfect and it's not 100% guaranteed, but ask yourself the question, which is what I think 10.4 of your regulation requires. If not this plan, what plan would be better? What plan would be more feasible in restoring the wetland and the vernal pool, filling the hole the way everyone in the town seems to want it to be filled? And remember again, the safety valve. If the plan is not successful, the violation will still exist, and you can require the applicant to do further remediation. Mr. Chairman, I think I've exceeded my time. I apologize, but I thank you all for your attention for tonight and throughout the hearings. Mr. Carp, maybe you want to address.
Good evening, Commission. Arnold Carp, as you guys know, through the many months, I am the managing member of the underlying owners of the property. I come here with a pretty consistent message, which is we have a simple plan and the restoration can work. With an approval from your commission, we could be in business trying to rehydrate the wetlands within 2 to 3 months or sooner. Okay, yes, it is going to take 10 years for us to get the proper clean fill to fill in the hole. We could be working on the wetlands as soon as spring or, upon your approval. So this isn't a 10-year program. This is if we come and make a decision and you guys view the plan as the right thing, we could be working together within 2 to 3 months. Okay. I've heard all the consultants. I've listened to Russ. I've listened to the intervener. Look, we're here for one reason and one reason only, which is to cure an issue and solve the problem, the scar that this property has. We didn't come, as Steve Finn had said earlier, and say, oh, we're not responsible. We came and we presented a plan. I've heard all the reasons that it might not work. I did hear 30% and 50%, and I've worked with Bill probably for 30 years. So when Bill Kenny says to me, geez, Arnold, I think this is the best way to do it, I'm going to take his advice. And the reason is I've known him for 30 years. He didn't say, geez, let's not do it this way. He truly believes in it, and I have to base my thoughts and my practicality of coming to you guys with a, very complex plan that's actually very easy. We're going to take the wetlands and we're going to rehydrate them. I've heard the term toast. I'm going to say we're going to make a very good breakfast entree out of this and make it work. We have a very complete application. The other thing is, if you guys approve it, you still have safeguards in place. I'm keeping Kevin on. Bill is still going to be part of the team. We're happy to come back and give you updates as required. So it's not like we're shirking or hiding from our responsibility. We're here to work with the inland wetlands, and I will add P&Z and the town of Monroe to take something that took 15 years plus and create it and make it into a viable piece of property for the community. And I've heard all the reasons that everybody says, oh, it may not work. My view and my heart of hearts is if we don't try, we'll never know. And, tonight, question came up, do we bury the pipe? Look, I've come before you and said, we will do whatever is necessary to make this work. But again, it's got to be economical from our point of view, but we're here with a very complete application that we think will truly work. So, I'm a big initial guys, and I've sort of keep on writing on all my notes, RWN, restoration works, and it could work now. In closing, I certainly appreciate everybody's time and effort. I believe we have a solution that could be a model for the town. Get this from it's an issue to the non-issue category, and with an approval and all the safeguards in place, I believe we can work together with that as the common goal. So again, I appreciate everybody's many hours in this, but again, our message is pretty consistent. We are happy to work on the restoration, get this done, have the proper oversight from our consultants, show the reports to the town, and make this move ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's Steve Finnegan. I forgot one, really, it'll take 30 seconds, and that is there was a question asked a couple of hearings ago about the language for the conservation easement. My experience with that is that as long as the parameters of the conservation easement, the actual boundaries of the conservation easement are part of the approval, the actual language that goes into the easement that gets filed on the land records is generally worked out with town council. It's not something that the commission gets into the nitty gritty and say, we want to see the language during the pendency of the hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. That's all I have. Thanks. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Finn. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to the intervener. Thank you to our third-party consultant, Russ DiRienzo. And thank you to the commissioners. I think we're ready to close this hearing. Denise? Yeah, oh, also, sorry, before I forget, anything has to be read into the public record?
That would be Donna.
Yes, it would be me, and I've read some of them. Barbara, I'm looking for your input here. Should I read all 73 exhibits into the record?
I think you have to be consistent with the practice that you've had, so.
Okay, because I don't know where we've left off, so for completeness, I'm going to start at 1 and go through. Sorry, bear with me. Exhibit 1 was the intervention notification. Exhibit 2 was notification
Wait,
occurring.
excuse me, Donna, I misunderstood. I don't think you have to read them all from the very beginning again. I thought you meant that there were an additional 73 exhibits. I think you can start from where you left off. If you're not sure, you want to go back a little bit, that's fine, but I don't think you have to reread what you've already read into the record. Unless that's a practice that the commission
No, I think just
normally
anything
has.
additional.
Excuse me?
Well, I'll have to say I've been trying to remember where I left off. So hold on 1 second.
I mean, obviously err on the side of caution to make sure
I
that
think it was 64, Donna. I think.
Yeah, I know, but I know that we didn't read it at one of the other meetings, so I wanted to. It's going to be a long list. Just bear with me. So I'm going to start where I.
Donna, while you're figuring that out, Russ, did you have something you wanted to say? You're muted, or I can't hear you.
He's not muted, but
Yeah, I can't hear him.
I can't hear him either.
Let me see if I can do anything here.
Barbara, in the meantime, are we allowed to continue our discussions with Russ after the public hearing is closed, since he's part of staff?
That is something I have to look into, because he's a little different than staff. So that is something that I'm going to need to get back to the commission on.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, Jim.
Commissioner Romano, it's Arnold Karp. Just one other thing that I was looking at. There is also a request of a very, very large bond, which we think has been not properly calculated by the town engineer. And, again, we're here to work together, but I'm not looking for financial penalty. So when you're in deliberations and you look at that, we're not sure that the math is actually accurate. It seems like there's a 50% upcharge on this project. Again, different owner than in the past. I think I have shown you guys our ability to try to get things done. So when that comes up, if you guys would just review that, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Barbara, how does that come into play?
It's up to the commission. It's in the commission's discretion.
But he's questioning who came, I believe was probably the town engineer, came up with a bond amount. He's questioning the methodology. How do we react to that?
Well, it's something that you can certainly, the staff engineer obviously is staff and, can comment on that further. But ultimately, it's going to be the commission's decision.
Barbara, you got muted. Barbara, you're muted.
I'm sorry. ultimately, it is going to be the commission's discretion to determine if it approves this application, what bond should be in place.
But as of right now, I assume we only have the one bond request from the town engineering or staff. How do we consider an alternative? Like, how do we, so, you know, Mr. Carp is saying that he thinks it's high. How do we know if it's high? Do we recalculate for ourselves? I mean, that's,
Well, I mean, that is something you can consult the staff engineer about.
so we need to
I mean,
have.
I don't know if Mr. Carp wants to give any further guidance or argument, you know, support for his position that would help the commission make a different determination. I think that's basically what the chairman is, the concern that the chairman is expressing. You know, how do we, if you're suggesting that the bond should be something different than what the staff engineer has suggested, what is the basis for that and what should it be?
Hi, if I may.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Arlene, go ahead.
Chris, why don't you?
Yeah, so just for the record, Chris Pulaski again, Solely Engineering. We provided a bond estimate to the town staff as a part of this application, and we believe that our estimate is correct and would fulfill the goals of this commission as in the bond estimate. So again, we encourage the commission to look at our estimate that was provided and to consider that as the bond amount. So thank you.
The way I understand it is the application has an amount that they have made part of their application. The town staff has come up with a different number. And so we want to either prove what's been presented in the application or go somewhere between that and where the staff has come up with.
That's in the commission's discretion.
Okay, thank you. That's all set.
Mr. Chairman, could you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Russ.
Oh, okay. I have a couple comments that I think need to be made. First, I just want to direct the commission that this is not an application. It's a remediation proposal based on a notice of violation. It's not an application. I keep hearing application. It's not that. I'm concerned about the conservation easement language not being already submitted because recent court ruling, Stu Leonard's in Orange, the intervener appealed because there were things approved after the approval of the application, such as that. The intervener has to have the right to see what the conservation easement language is. That's part of the deal. Mr. Finn has stated over and over that there's no other alternatives that anybody has proposed, which is totally wrong. I proposed off-site mitigation. I proposed wetland creation somewhere else. I do agree EPA and DEEP want recreation of a injured wetland rather than off-site or on-site creation of a new one. But all the alternatives that Bill Kenny presented is off-site, is mitigation, creation of wetlands. So he kind of builds up what I've been saying all along. I think that a plan of 900,000, 980,000 cubic yards to fix a wetland is way out there compared to mitigation or creation of a new wetland. And all his examples show successful creations of new wetlands. None of his exhibits show pumping water out of a well into a vernal pool to rehydrate it. It's none of them. So I want to make those points. And the commission basically, I think you have enough information now to make a decision. The decision is not on an application, it's on a remediation project. Do you agree that this is the best way to remediate this wetland? It's not about filling a quarry, building a building. They threw that in there. Unfortunately, you're going to have to consider that and consider whether that really fits in to a remediation program. And Mr. Stewart made a good point. I'm not sure if I could consult with the commission after the public hearing is closed or concluded. Thank you.
Thank you. Denise?
Yeah, Keith, I've had a couple things I wanted to say. Some things I want to kind of get into the record. If I understood correctly, Mr. Finn made mention to 224 Guinea Road, and what he referred to as a pond is actually a pool, and it's a concrete lined basin. So filling that in is a little different than our project, but that's just another thing. We received the letter of comments from Sully Engineer, and I just want on the record that I took a little bit of an exception to the fact that he stated that he received our comments less than 24 hours. I feel that we have bent over backwards, accepting data couple days before and trying to get things reviewed in a timely fashion. We did have responses to him back in October, and the next submission that we received was actually a December 3rd. So there wasn't any lag on the town's part. And then there was some questions, or I wanted to bring up about some comments from the town engineer. I gather Scott had a bit of a conference call or a discussion with Kevin. Chris may be privy with this detail, but I just kind of wanted to be known. They discussed a little bit about the 100-year storm and the phase 1 with the orifice and the no orifice and that sort of thing. Scott just wanted to let it be known that he is okay in concept, but that if the Inland Wetland Commission is okay, the layout cannot change based on new calc. So what he basically saying is, Kevin,
for the record,
hold on. Kevin, let her fit. Kevin, hold on.
Yes.
Who is speaking? Kevin, we're getting feedback from you, but Denise is speaking.
So what Scott told me is that Kevin feels that he can take care of Scott's comments. And we don't believe there's going to be a change in design, but Scott wanted it to be known that he agrees with it in concept. And as long as when he addresses his comments, there is no change in layout. If there is a change in layout, that means he has to go back to IWC, which I know he knows, but we just want it out there because, Scott's not at this meeting to discuss his comments.
Think that's it, Denise?
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to read into the record the
exhibits?
Yes, the exhibits.
Okay. I'm going to start off with those were read in. I'm going to start off with Exhibit 25 just because I'm not sure. I can't remember where we were. It's changed and updated so many times. So anyway, Exhibit 25 was the materials manifest that was submitted by Sully Engineering. It wasn't dated, but it was the materials manifest for 64 Cambridge. Exhibit 26 were Conservation Commission comments. Exhibit 27 was the scope of work for third-party review. 28 was a request for estimates for third-party reviews. 29, 30, 31, and 32 were quote from NSAFE, Laurelio, Beeler, and Figrella, and Rustorenzo. I'm probably slaughtering those names. Exhibit 33 was a response to Attorney Green's email regarding scope of third-party review. Exhibit 34 was public comment by Margaret Miner. Exhibit 35 was an updated inland wetland agent comments by Denise. Exhibit 36 was a letter from Southwest Conservation District in regards to consultant hiring. Exhibit 37 was a letter regarding response to Attorney Warren and Finn about the scope of work. Exhibit 38 was a letter regarding Work History Association. Exhibit 39 was an email to Attorney Schellenberg regarding intervenor status. Exhibit 40 was a memo to the Inland Wetlands Commission regarding intervenor status by Attorney Green. Exhibit 41 were aerial photos of the application site over various points in time that was presented by Attorney Green. Exhibit 42 was a hydrogeological investigation prepared by WSP USA. It was submitted by Solely Engineering. Exhibit 43 was Alta Environmental cover letter and presentation material presented during the October 28th meeting by Evan Glass. Exhibit 44 was confirmation and agreement to pay for third-party review by Arnold Karp and members of Astro and Spacely Land Holdings. Exhibit 45, acceptance of Arcadis agreement by the Town Council on November 9th. Exhibit 46, opinion letter regarding application submitted information and reports by Russ Dorenzo. Exhibit 47, Connecticut Deep permit for 64 Cambridge submitted by Solely. Exhibit 48 was public comment by Margaret Miner. Exhibit 49, A, B was a letter on behalf of the intervener, and B was the photo exhibits. Exhibit 50, updated comments, A and B photos. Exhibit 51 were additional photo exhibits. Exhibit 52 was a letter to the commission response to Mr. DiRenzo's report. Exhibit 53 were questions from the intervener by Attorney Joel Green. Exhibit 54 was a letter to the commission by George Logan Rima. Exhibit 55 was an email to the commission from the public, Margaret Miner. Exhibit 56, A and B, was a cover letter and updated plans by Solely Engineering. Exhibit 57 was a cover letter to the commission by Solely Engineering. Exhibit 58 was subsurface and stockpile investigation report by WSP USA. Exhibit 59 was a map with one sheet titled Proposed Lot Line Revision and Conservation Easement by Solely Engineering. Exhibit 60 was a map titled Cross Section Exhibit. Exhibit 61 was a 21 sheet plan set titled Proposed Site Development Restoration by Solely Engineering. 62 was a wetland and vernal pool assessment supplemental information. It was a booklet by William Kenny Associates. Exhibit 63 was an updated inland wetland agent comments by Denise Halstead. Exhibit 64 was a letter to the commission on various subjects by Dave Bjorklund. Exhibit 65 was a map titled Alternate Fill Proposal on Independence Drive by staff Bjorklund. Exhibit 66 was a letter to the commission from Alta Environmental by Evan Glass. Exhibit 67 was a letter to the commission on behalf of the intervener by George Logan from REMA. Exhibit 68, A, B, and C was a response documentation along with some photos, older documentation. I don't have the breakdown right here, but it all has been displayed up on the town website. Exhibit 69 was a two-sheet plan set, proposed lot line revision and conservation easement by Solely. Exhibit 70 was an engineering report binder by Solely Engineering. The original date was 5/26/20. The revision date was 12/11/20. Number 71 was the proposed site development and restoration by Solely Engineering. The document was dated February 25th and the revision date was December 11th. And Exhibit 72 was William Kenny's resume, and Exhibit 73 was the extraordinary wetland management presentation, which had been emailed to the commission because the document I didn't have it in hard copy. And that, my friends, is the end of it.
Thank you, Donna. Thank
Sorry.
you, Donna. I just have a question. I'm trying to figure something out here. Maybe Chris, you can answer this. I had a question, and I believe there's another commissioner asked the same question for a cross section through the property, a couple cross sections, and I'm looking through the plan. Can you tell me which section they're alphabetical is the one that answered our request?
Yeah, Keith. So if you look at Exhibit C-CS, it's the cross-section exhibit. That was in response to your comments. So that shows you the approved, the existing, and the pre-existing, if you will, cross-sections. There's one going north-south, and there's one going.
Which page is that? What page on the plan set we just got?
It's Exhibit-CS. It's a separate plan. It's the cross-section exhibit. There's a conservation easement exhibit and a cross-section exhibit.
It's like two separate pages, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Thank you, Denise.
Yep.
Wait, which one? What is it called?
It's called the cross-section exhibit. It's EX-CS.
Yeah.
There's like two separate pages.
When would we have gotten that? Or is that the stuff that was?
You got it last time and you just got it this time because they updated it with a 12/10 date on or 12/11 date on it.
Correct.
So it was in the packet this time
the
as well.
The title is the cross-section exhibit. It's sheet EX-CS.
Oh, EX. Okay, I think it was folded up. It wasn't in the plan. I got it. All right, sorry.
Correct. No worries.
No, thank you. Okay, are we ready to close this public hearing?
Motion to adjourn.
Well,
No.
to-
You need a motion to close the public hearing.
yes, that's what we're looking for.
Sorry, motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion from Commissioner Stewart.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Spence. All in favor?
Aye.
We need
Okay.
to leave the meeting open for a minute, though. Don't close the meeting.
No, I'm not. I'm not closing the meeting. There's a couple things. I think we should all have get a golden cattail or something after this. You know, like a Emmy, like a Oscar. First, I want to address whoever's seen the letter from Commissioner Stewart about leave of absence, hiatus. And I don't know who's read it. You want to just speak on that, Jim?
I'm just taking a class for the next 13 weeks. It's on Wednesday night, so I don't know how I can do this and the other at the same time. So I just requested that I get a leave of absence and I could come back in 13 weeks. I believe the class starts the first Wednesday in January, so this would be the last meeting I see you guys for a while.
Well, it was brought up by council and I. Could we continue doing alternate nights to deal with this application? Because Jim, you've sat through the whole entire process, and to not have your input and or vote could cause make it a little tough. So if we could continue the deliberations at a special session, Barbara.
Yes, I think that's the way to go. And, you don't have to discuss that tonight. We can, Donna can email the commissioners. We can see what dates are available. But that's what I would recommend, because I agree not to have Commissioner Stewart be part of the deliberations after hearing this entire application over so many months.
Boy, I feel so loved.
We're so glad you feel that way, Jim.
He's taking the class to get out of this. That's what he's doing.
Recommendation, and I know.
Not so fast.
If I was wasting every Wednesday night, I might as well get something out of it.
Okay, you won't have to deal with the regular meetings at least, right? But yeah, I know the commission wants to deliberate in January after the new year, so we have a little time to figure out the dates. And again, I believe we now have a total of 50 days to complete deliberations and for the commission to come to a decision on this application. So there is a little time, and I imagine this is going to require more than one meeting. So I would certainly recommend scheduling 2 special meetings. But as I said, we can do that behind the scenes, so to speak.
So we would have to be done, Barbara, before our February 10th that's not 50 days is before February 10th, I believe, just quick math. So we have right now January 13th and 27th are the only two that we have actually on our schedule between now and the 50 days. So we probably would need special sessions, I would think, the amount of stuff
Right.
that we have to discuss.
Right, as I said, I think that was contemplated even before Commissioner Stewart announced his leave of absence. So
Okay.
we'll figure that out, and we'll obviously make sure that we get it done within the time frame that we have.
Great. So, all right, Lois, did you have something you wanted to just say before we close the meeting?
I wanted to say thank you to staff. I think they did an absolutely outstanding job at handling all these last minute things that came in out of nowhere. And they did it with grace and they did it well. And I really wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Just not that everyone thinks I ignored them, but when I do say commission, I actually mean them as well. You know, we're the one team, yes. So, but yes, thank you for Commissioner Spence for that accolade to them. That they definitely deserve it. All right, someone make the motion.
I make the motion that we close the special meeting tonight.
Thank you. That was a motion by Commissioner Gingras. Second by Commissioner Spence. All in favor?
Aye.